Shattered the moment the HOA decided my pickup truck was too much of an eyesore. What if I told you my neighbor had a secret inside their house, a room the HOA swore didn't exist? At first, it sounded like one of those neighborhood rumors, but one night I heard noises coming from inside, metallic clanging, the low hum of machines, and shadows moving across the window when no one was supposed to be home. I thought it was nothing until I found out the HOA had actually sealed part of the records, almost as if they were hiding something. That's when I realized this wasn't just a room, it was a secret, and the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. What I discovered behind that locked door left me speechless. I live in a suburban neighborhood called Oak Ridge Estates. From the outside, it looks picture perfect. Manicured lawns, kids riding bikes, neighbors waving from their driveways. But behind every white picket fence, there are stories, whispers, and secrets. One house, in particular, always caught my eye. It wasn't run down, it wasn't flashy, just ordinary. Too ordinary. But neighbors talked. They said inside that house was a room, a hidden room, that nobody had ever been allowed to see. At first, I laughed it off. I mean, who hides a room in their own house? But the more I heard, the more I noticed little details myself. Deliveries at odd hours, curtains always drawn tight, a window that seemed to belong to nothing. And then came the moment that changed everything. I overheard Margaret, the head of the HOA, warning another resident not to ask questions about the room. That's when I knew there was more to this story than anyone wanted to admit. The problem was simple. How do you investigate something that no one will talk about? The HOA was like a brick wall. Every time someone mentioned the room, the board members got defensive. It's just a basement. It's nothing important. Focus on your own house. But I couldn't let it go. I started digging through HOA meeting notes, vague references to restricted areas and community compliance storage, but nothing concrete. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones. One said they'd heard loud thuds at night. Another claimed they'd seen men in uniforms hauling boxes through the side entrance. A third swore that years ago, someone else tried to investigate and suddenly moved away without explanation. The challenge wasn't just uncovering the room, it was breaking through a wall of silence. The more questions I asked, the colder the stares became. I wasn't just facing curiosity anymore, I was facing resistance. And resistance meant there was something worth hiding. I decided to investigate, step by step. First, I walked past the house at different times of day. In the mornings, nothing unusual, but late at night, that's when things got strange. A faint glow from the cracks in the blinds, the unmistakable hum of machines, like industrial fans or power tools. I took notes. Times, sounds, even shadows. I could make out movement that didn't match someone simply living their life. Next, I tried documents, HOA bylaws, property records, building permits. That's when I found something odd. Years ago, a construction permit had been filed for the house, but the project was marked as confidential. A sealed room, reinforced walls, and something listed as environmental containment. Containment? For what? Then came the deliveries. I saw vans with no logos dropping off identical brown crates. The delivery men never lingered. They wheeled the boxes straight inside through a side entrance that no one else ever used. I asked a delivery driver once, half jokingly, "What's in the box?" He froze, then muttered, "Property of HOA." I laughed, but he didn't. He just shut the door and drove off. I wasn't alone in my suspicions. A few neighbors admitted they'd seen odd things too.
Flickering lights, loud bangs, even one who claimed to hear voices chanting late at night. Sarah, my wife, thought I was going too far. She said, "It's probably just storage. You're making this bigger than it is." But my gut told me otherwise. The final clue came from a contractor I tracked down who had worked on renovations years back. When I asked him about the house, he shook his head and went pale. "I can't talk about it. Just don't go inside." That's when I knew. This wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was a mystery, one that was hiding right in plain sight.
The breakthrough came on a gray afternoon, the kind of day where the whole neighborhood felt hushed. Clouds pressed low, shadows stretched long, and the hum of cicadas made the silence more noticeable. I was walking past when I noticed something unusual. The side door to Margaret's house wasn't just open, it was propped with a crate. 2 delivery workers wheeled in another heavy box, sweat glistening on their foreheads. My pulse quickened. This was my window. I waited until they disappeared inside. Then, careful not to be seen, I slipped closer. Every step felt like thunder in my ears. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over record. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I wasn't in a normal house. The air was heavy, metallic, and unnervingly cold, not like a basement draft, but more like walking into a server room. The walls weren't painted plaster, they were steel, lined with insulation and bolts. This wasn't home construction, it was industrial. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into the dimly lit room, each tagged with stamped labels, HOA Confidential. My hand trembled as I pulled one drawer open. Inside were folders, each marked with the names of people I knew, neighbors, families. I pulled one out. Miller, Daniel. My stomach dropped. The file wasn't just a few pages. It was thick. Inside were photographs of my house, my car, even me mowing the lawn. Notes about my so-called infractions. Copies of fines I'd never even received. I flipped to the next folder. My neighbor's name. Same thing. Photos, complaints, legal drafts. This wasn't an accident. This was a system. And then I saw the crates stacked in the corner. Unlike the cabinets, these weren't labeled with names. They were labeled with dates. Curious, I pried one open. Inside were pre-written violation notices, all signed, all stamped, ready to be delivered in the future. I froze. They weren't just documenting the past, they were planning the future, punishing residents before they'd even done anything. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing against the steel walls. I turned. Margaret stood there, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing like a predator that had caught its prey. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. For a second, my legs wouldn't move. My brain screamed, "Run," but my body felt frozen in place. Then instinct took over. I bolted, past the cabinets, past the crates, shoving the door open so hard it banged against the wall. I didn't stop running until I was back in my house, door locked, chest heaving. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like someone coming for me. But one thing was certain. I couldn't stay silent.
The fallout began almost immediately. At the next HOA meeting, the community center was packed. Dozens of neighbors filled the chairs, some standing along the walls. Everyone had heard the whispers, and everyone wanted answers. Margaret sat at the front, gavel in hand, her smug expression daring anyone to challenge her. The agenda was written in bold: authorization of legal action against Daniel Miller. I stood when my name was called, folder of evidence in my hand. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart hammered. "Before you vote," I said, "you all need to see this." One by one, I laid out the evidence. Photos I'd taken inside the hidden room, copies of the files showing residents' names, the pre-written fines stamped with dates that hadn't even happened yet. The room buzzed with whispers, heads turned, faces went pale. Margaret slammed the gavel. "These are fabricated lies! He broke into private property!" But I cut her off. "They're not lies. They're your system. You've been tracking us, finding us, planning punishments before anyone even violated a rule." I pulled out my trump card, a written statement from an attorney. It confirmed that parking spots, fines, and secret surveillance all fell outside legal HOA authority. If it continued, the HOA board could be sued personally. For the first time, Margaret's face faltered. And then the spark that lit the fire. From the back of the room, a neighbor stood. "He's telling the truth! I've seen that room too!" Gasps rippled. Another neighbor stood, then another. Soon, voices erupted across the room. People who'd been bullied, fined unfairly, or silenced. Margaret banged the gavel again, but no one listened. Her power had cracked. The board members, usually silent under her glare, shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered to each other. Others avoided her eyes entirely. Finally, one spoke. "Maybe it's time we reviewed leadership." That was the moment it all unraveled. In the weeks that followed, Oak Ridge Estates felt transformed. The fines against me were rescinded, the hidden files were collected and destroyed, and neighbors who once avoided eye contact now came to my door to thank me. "You stood up for all of us," one man said, his voice shaking. At the next election, Margaret ran again, but this time she wasn't unopposed. 3 new candidates, backed by the community, stepped forward. When the ballots were counted, Margaret's name sank to the bottom. She was out. The HOA board was reshaped almost overnight. Meetings became open, transparent. Rules were enforced fairly, not as weapons. And for the first time in months, peace returned. I could park in my spot without fear. My wife Sarah smiled again when she watered her flowers. Even the neighbors, once divided, now chatted openly. But the story didn't end there. Someone had recorded the explosive meeting and leaked it online. Within days, the video racked up thousands of views. Strangers from across the country flooded the comments. That HOA Karen got destroyed. This is why I'll never live in an HOA community. Daniel is a legend. My fight had gone viral. What started as a neighborhood dispute had become a story people everywhere could relate to. It wasn't just about a secret room anymore. It was about abuse of power and what happens when ordinary people refuse to back down.
Sometimes I walk past Margaret's old house. The side door is locked now, the steel room emptied. But I'll never forget stepping inside. The chill of the air, the rows of cabinets filled with secrets, the sight of my own name on a file I was never meant to see. It taught me something bigger than HOA politics. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Truth has a way of clawing its way into the light. And sometimes, the most ordinary-looking house can hide the darkest stories. One evening, as Sarah and I parked in our driveway, she nudged me with a smile. All this over a secret room. I laughed, shaking my head. Not just a room. Our right to know what was hidden inside. That was the real victory.
So what about you? Have you ever discovered something in your neighborhood you weren't supposed to see? A secret room? A hidden document? Maybe even an HOA cover-up? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because the next story might just make you look at your neighbors a little differently.
They told me not to ask questions. They told me not to poke around in places that didn't concern me. But what if the very thing they were hiding was sitting in plain sight all along? In the middle of our neighborhood stood a house, boarded up, forgotten, and officially erased from every HOA record. But when I pushed back against their warnings and stepped inside, I discovered why they wanted it hidden. What I found would send shivers down my spine, and once it came to light, it would change the entire community forever.
You dare to open the door to a house your HOA swore never existed? At first, life in the neighborhood seemed perfect. The kind of place where lawns were trimmed like green carpets, mailboxes gleamed with a fresh coat of paint, and neighbors waved politely but rarely lingered long enough for real conversation. It was orderly, predictable, and tightly controlled. For the family who had moved in only a year earlier, this was supposed to be their escape. They wanted quiet weekends, safety for their kids, and the kind of stability that came from living in a well-managed community. The HOA promised all of that, and on the surface they delivered. But something always felt off. On walks with their dog, the family noticed one house that didn't match the perfection surrounding it. The grass grew tall, vines snaked up the siding, and the windows were sealed tight with weathered boards. No one came and went. Children whispered about it on their way to school, daring each other to run up and touch the peeling front door before sprinting away. When they asked about it at the next HOA meeting, the room went quiet. The president cleared his throat, brushed the question aside, and moved on to the next agenda item. No explanation, no discussion, just silence. It was strange, yes, but in a neighborhood where rules dictated even the color of your blinds, the silence felt heavier, more intentional. And deep down, the family knew this house was the thread that, if pulled, would unravel everything the HOA had worked so hard to control.
The more they asked, the colder the responses became. Letters arrived in the mailbox, fines for yard infractions that didn't exist, warnings about unauthorized modifications they had never made. Each fine came with the same message: pay quietly or face escalation. But the timing was too perfect to ignore. Every new question about the abandoned house brought another punishment. Neighbors began avoiding them. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when they approached. Even friends who once invited them to backyard barbecues now crossed the street to avoid being seen together. Fear had seeped into the air like smoke. The family decided to dig deeper. They searched public records, but the property seemed to vanish into a bureaucratic black hole. No current owner listed, no sale history, nothing but decades-old deeds that went nowhere. It was as if the house didn't exist officially. Still, the HOA's obsession with silence made their curiosity burn harder. Why go to such lengths to hide one house? One night, returning from work, the father noticed a figure near the property. A man in a dark jacket was slipping through the gate, flashlight in hand. But when confronted, he bolted, vanishing into the night before a word could be exchanged. The next morning, another fine appeared in the mailbox. This one claimed their trash can had been visible outside approved collection hours. The absurdity was clear, but so was the threat. The HOA was weaponizing anyone and anything to silence them. The family stood at a crossroads. Back down or push forward. They chose the latter. Late one evening, under cover of darkness, they cut through the padlock on the side gate of the abandoned house. The boards creaked, dust filled the air, and the smell of rot clung to the walls. Flashlights revealed peeling wallpaper, overturned furniture, and stacks of unopened HOA leathers, dozens of them, years worth, stuffed into a corner like someone had abandoned their life overnight. And in that moment, it became clear. The HOA had been hiding something far bigger than a neglected house. But before they could process it all, a shadow appeared in the doorway. Someone had followed them inside.
The HOA president himself stood there, red-faced, fury in his eyes. He demanded they leave immediately, warning that they were trespassing, breaking community law, endangering themselves. But his outrage was too desperate, too rehearsed. When the family refused, when they told them they'd seen enough to involve the city, Something inside him snapped. His threats turned into screaming. He called them liars, troublemakers, people who didn't belong. He swore he'd have their homes seized, their reputation destroyed, their lives ruined. But what he didn't know was that the family had recorded everything. The fines, the threats, the inspections, and now this confrontation. The video went viral within days. News outlets picked it up, calling it the HOA horror story. Reporters swarmed the neighborhood. Residents who'd once stayed silent found their courage, stepping forward with their own stories. Harassment, intimidation, and years of unexplained HOA spending. The final blow came in court. A judge ordered a full audit of the HOA, uncovering years of mismanagement, secret funds, and illegal practices. The abandoned house, once dismissed as irrelevant, became the centerpiece of the case, a physical symbol of their corruption and secrecy. In the courtroom, when the ruling was read aloud, the president's face fell. He was barred from ever serving again. The HOA board was dissolved. Heavy fines were levied. And for the first time in years, the residents felt free. The climax wasn't just legal, it was emotional. The family who endured so much stood vindicated. Their defiance had turned the tide. The monster had been unmasked, its secrets dragged into the light for all to see. The silence that followed the HOA president's downfall was unlike anything the neighborhood had ever experienced. For years, fear and secrecy had been the background noise of daily life. Residents whispered about fines, avoided eye contact with board members, and carefully trimmed hedges or painted shutters in obsessive compliance. But after the hearing, when the judge ruled against the HOA, the community changed almost overnight. The abandoned house at the center of it all, once hidden, boarded up, and treated like a shameful secret, was finally opened. The locks were cut, the windows unsealed, and for the first time in decades, sunlight poured into its dusty halls. What neighbors saw shocked them. Mold creeping up wallpaper, piles of rotting furniture, and stacks of HOA correspondence left unanswered, some still in envelopes dated years back. It was as if time had been frozen, the house standing as a monument to neglect and obsession. The family, who had endured months of intimidation, fines, and veiled threats, stood there among the crowd as city inspectors shook their heads in disbelief. The house wasn't just a health hazard, it was physical evidence of everything the HOA had tried so desperately to hide. And here was the irony. The very rules the HOA used to terrorize residents had left the board themselves vulnerable. By keeping the property hidden, refusing to disclose ownership, and silencing anyone who asked questions, the leadership had violated transparency laws and concealed community records. When that came to light, the ruling was swift. But the true impact wasn't just in legal victories. It was in the shift of power. For the first time, neighbors who once avoided each other now gathered in the street, talking openly, no longer afraid. They formed a committee, not of control, but of accountability. The family, once painted as troublemakers, found themselves approached with gratitude. Children rode bikes freely again, yards blossomed with individuality instead of rigid uniformity. And the abandoned house was eventually restored, not by the HOA, but by a collective of residents who wanted to turn a symbol of secrecy into one of rebirth. The scars remained, yes, but the lesson was clear. Power, when unchecked, festers, and silence only feeds it. The final town hall meeting brought everything full circle. Residents gathered in the newly restored house, its walls freshly painted, the air smelling of wood polish instead of mildew.
The family spoke not of revenge, but of truth. This house was hidden from us for years, but maybe that's the real lesson. Secrets, when left in the dark, grow into monsters. What destroyed this community wasn't just neglect, it was silence. Never again should we let fears stop us from asking questions, from standing up when something feels wrong. The applause was thunderous. And from that moment, the abandoned house wasn't just bricks and wood anymore. It was a story, a warning, a reminder that communities must be built on trust, not fear. And maybe, as you watch this now, you should ask yourself, if there was an abandoned house on your street, one your HOA swore didn't exist, would you have the courage to open the door?
They came in the dead of morning, armed with bulldozers and legal notices, ready to take my home apart. My neighbors watched in silence, some smirking, others shaking their heads as the HOA claimed I violated every rule they could invent. I had paid every fee, followed every regulation, yet here they were, acting like kings of a kingdom I didn't even know I lived in. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I discovered something about my family that made the HOA's power play look like child's play. What happens when the people trying to destroy you don't know who they're really messing with?
Everyday life in our little lakeside community had always felt peaceful. Quiet streets lined with perfectly trimmed lawns, families waving as they walked their dogs, the occasional kids' laughter echoing from nearby yards. My mornings began with coffee on the porch, the sun glinting off the water, my family joking and planning the day ahead. We weren't flashy, we weren't confrontational, we simply loved our home and the freedom it gave us. But beneath the manicured lawns and polite smiles, the HOA watched every detail. Rules hung over the neighborhood like a shadow. What color you could paint your mailbox, how tall your garden flowers could grow, even how late you could park your car. Most residents ignored them quietly, paying fees and moving along. We never thought much about it until one small notice arrived in our mailbox, the language sharp and threatening, hinting at a violation we didn't understand. At first we laughed it off, thinking it must be a clerical mistake, but something in the tone, the insistence, made a chill run down my spine. The rules that had felt distant and abstract suddenly felt personal, invasive, like an invisible hand ready to crush anyone who stepped out of line. And though we had no idea yet, this tiny spark was about to ignite a conflict that would turn our peaceful lives upside down.
Escalating tension. Each new scene should feel like the pressure is mounting. Fines get bigger, letters more threatening, board members more smug. The first warning signs felt small at first. A sharply worded email from the HOA about landscaping violations I didn't even know existed. The notice said my garden flowers were too tall, my driveway too cluttered, and my mailbox slightly misaligned with the street curb. At first, I laughed. Surely this was just an overzealous administrator making a mountain out of a molehill. But the laughter quickly faded when I received the next notice, a fine, escalating each week, accompanied by a passive-aggressive warning that continued non-compliance could lead to further legal action. I tried to meet them halfway. I trimmed my flowers, rearranged my driveway, and even painted the mailbox an approved shade of green. Yet the notices kept coming, each one harsher than the last, each demanding proof of compliance as if I were guilty until proven innocent. By now, the tension had seeped into every corner of my life. The simple pleasure of sitting on my porch vanished, replaced by dread every time I checked the mailbox. Then came the letters demanding access to my property for inspection purposes. I had never refused an official inspection, but these requests were sudden, often at inconvenient times, and sometimes delivered with a tone that felt more like a threat than a request. It wasn't long before neighbors began staring, whispering, some clearly entertained by the unfolding drama. I could feel their judgment and curiosity, and it added a layer of humiliation I had not anticipated.
One morning, a notice arrived claiming I had violated a rule that didn't exist, at least not in any document I could find. The HOA claimed that my property's landscaping plan did not match the official approved design from the community handbook. I had followed every guideline, yet suddenly everything I had built, nurtured, and maintained for years was non-compliant. I tried to argue, sending emails, photographs, and even certified letters, but each time the HOA responded with a mechanical coldness, repeating their accusations and threatening harsher fines. The tension escalated further when a local HOA board member showed up unannounced. He walked the property, taking photos, pointing out imagined infractions, and remarking on things that had never been questioned before. "We just want to keep the neighborhood uniform," he said, but the tone carried the barely concealed threat, a reminder that my home, my sanctuary, was under constant scrutiny. It was impossible to feel safe. Fines piled up faster than I could pay them, each letter arriving stamped with urgency and consequence. Electricity bills, water lines, plumbing, nothing was off limits. The HOA even claimed that a small decorative shed I had built in my backyard required retroactive approval, demanding immediate removal or face penalties. My frustration swelled, bordering on rage, as every attempt to comply seemed to only fuel their determination to torment me. The breaking point came when I discovered that the HOA had begun discussing my property at community meetings, framing me as a disruptive, rule-breaking resident. Friends and acquaintances whispered behind my back. Even those who had been supportive seemed nervous, unsure if aligning with me might make them the next target. Isolation, humiliation, and helplessness wrapped around me like a cold fog. Back in my home, at night I pored over the HOA guidelines again, comparing every letter, every rule, every nuance. I meticulously documented each interaction, each notice, each fine, preparing for the inevitable escalation. But the more I dug, the more apparent it became. The HOA was operating in a gray area, bending rules to intimidate rather than enforce. Their power wasn't based on fairness, it was based on fear. And then, just when I thought I had anticipated everything, a letter arrived that changed everything. It was marked "Immediate Action Required," and it referenced multiple alleged violations, fines, and threats of property liens. But buried in the formal language was a line that made my blood run cold. Failure to comply will result in physical remediation of the property at the owner's expense. In other words, they were planning to come onto my land and physically alter or remove structures that had been part of my home for years. My heart raced as I read it. Was this legal? Could they really do that? I felt cornered, suffocated, and yet a strange resolve began to take root. This wasn't just about flowers, mailboxes, or sheds anymore. It was about my home, my family, and my dignity. I realized that to survive this ordeal, I couldn't just comply, I had to fight back. I reached out to a lawyer, trying to understand the full extent of their authority. Each call, each consultation revealed just how much power the HOA wielded, but also where they overstepped. There were loopholes, technicalities, and moments of vulnerability that they hadn't anticipated. Slowly, a plan began to form in my mind, not out of malice, but necessity. But as the days passed, the tension only grew. Unmarked cars began parking near my home. HOA members appeared more frequently than ever, seemingly just watching, evaluating, waiting for me to make a misstep. Every email, every notice, every visit became a test of endurance, a battle of wills. I knew.
Ever been slapped with an HOA fine that made 0 sense? Yeah, you're not alone. These HOAs think they can fine you for anything: a mailbox color, a flower pot, even your car in the driveway. But here's the thing. Most homeowners don't realize there are legal loopholes and simple tricks to fight back and win.
I've seen people get thousands in fines completely erased using these hacks, and the HOA couldn't do a thing about it. So before you pay another dime to your HOA, watch this to the end, because I'm about to show you 5 legal hacks that'll make your HOA think twice before messing with you again.
HOAs were supposed to protect communities, keep neighborhoods clean, safe, organized. But lately, they've turned into mini dictatorships, handing out ridiculous fines for the smallest things. I've seen people fined for having the wrong shade of grass, a trash can left out for an hour, or even a flagpole in their own yard. And when you question them, they throw around words like violation and bylaws, hoping you'll just pay up and shut up. But here's what they don't want you to know. Most of those fines can actually be challenged, waived, or completely overturned if you know how to fight back the right way. See, HOAs count on one thing: your fear. They assume you won't read the rules, won't question the paperwork, and won't stand up for yourself. That's where they lose, because once you understand your rights, you hold all the power. I've helped homeowners who got hundreds in fines, gone overnight. Some even got apologies from their HOA boards once they used these tricks. And the best part? Every single method I'm about to share is 100% legal. No shady loopholes, no breaking rules, just smart, strategic moves they don't expect. So whether you're being fined for a mailbox color, your car in the driveway, or a few weeds on the lawn, stick around, because these 5 legal hacks might just save you hundreds of dollars and your sanity. Ready? Let's start with hack number 1. And trust me, this one alone could change how you deal with your HOA forever.
Hack number 1. Know the rules better than the HOA does. Most homeowners never read their HOA's bylaws or CC&Rs, and that's exactly what the HOA counts on. Because the less you know, the easier it is for them to find you without question. But here's the truth. 70% of HOA fines come from rules that are misinterpreted or applied incorrectly. That means if you know what's actually written, you can challenge their fine, and in many cases, win. So, the first legal hack is simple. Read their rule book like a lawyer. Go through the CC&Rs, that's the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and highlight every section about violations, fines, and appeal rights. You'd be shocked how many HOAs violate their own rules when fining homeowners. They'll skip warning letters, ignore appeal windows, or fine you for something that isn't even covered in their bylaws. Example: one homeowner I talked to was fined $250 for parking on the street overnight. But when he checked the CC&Rs, it said no long-term street parking over 72 hours. He sent a written notice quoting their own document. And guess what? Fine dismissed. Instantly. And here's the secret weapon. Always ask for written documentation of the rule you supposedly broke. If they can't show it in writing, that fine is built on sand. This first hack is all about flipping the power dynamic. Once they realize you've actually read the book, they tread carefully because they know you can call them out. So, before paying any fine, remember this: knowledge is your shield. Know their rules better than they do, and you've already won half the battle. All right, now that you've got your defense ready, let's talk about hack number 2, where you turn their own paperwork into your best weapon. Hack number 2, use their paperwork against them. Every HOA fine starts with paperwork, a notice of violation, a warning letter, or sometimes a simple email. And most people panic when they get it. They either pay up or argue emotionally. But here's the secret. The paperwork itself is often their biggest mistake. By law, HOAs must follow a strict process when issuing fines. That means written notice, proof of violation, and a clear explanation of your right to a hearing. Miss any one of those steps, and the fine becomes legally invalid. I've seen homeowners completely erase fines just by asking for one simple thing. Please provide proof that you followed all required notice procedures.
That one sentence can make the board freeze, because often they didn't. Let's say they find you for yard maintenance. Ask for time-stamped photos, the violation report, and the exact rule number you supposedly broke. If they can't provide those, it's a weak case, and you can request the fine be dismissed on procedural grounds. And if they send letters with no signature or missing dates, that's gold. It shows improper notice, which can legally void the fine. Most HOAs hate when you catch these errors because it proves you're paying attention. Here's another tip. Always respond in writing, email, or certified mail. It creates a paper trail. That way, if they escalate the fine or threaten legal action, you've got evidence showing they didn't follow their own process. The goal isn't to be rude, it's to be precise. When you stay calm, professional, and back up your words with their own rules, the HOA suddenly loses all that false authority. So, hack number 2 is simple. Don't argue, document. Use their paperwork, their words, and their process against them. Because when the facts are on your side, the HOA's power starts to crumble. Up next, hack number 3, where I'll show you how to use one small meeting to turn the entire board in your favor. Hack number 3, show up to the hearing and control the room. Most homeowners skip their HOA hearing because they think it's pointless, that the board has already made its mind. But here's the truth. Those meetings are your biggest weapon. Why? Because when you show up, the dynamic changes completely. HOAs are used to people staying silent or arguing over email. But when you walk into that room calm, prepared, and professional, it throws them off balance. They realize you're not just another angry homeowner. You're someone who knows your rights. Before your hearing, prepare 3 things. 1. A copy of the fine notice. 2. The section of the bylaws that applies. And 3. Any proof or photos that back up your side. Bring them printed, not digital. Paper in hand makes you look serious and credible. Then, when it's your turn to speak, start strong and polite. I'm here to clarify this violation and request the fine be removed based on Section X of the HOA's rules. Simple, factual, no emotion. It shows confidence, and it forces the board to engage logically, not personally. Here's the kicker. These hearings are often recorded or have minutes taken. That means anything they say can later be used in your favor if they mishandle it. One wrong statement from them, like ignoring your right to appeal, can invalidate their entire decision. And if they try to rush you or talk over you, stay calm. Say, "I'd like that on record, please." That one line reminds them this is official, and suddenly they start choosing their words very carefully. I've seen people walk out of those meetings with fines reversed, apologies issued, and even new respect from the board, all because they showed up prepared. Remember, confidence and clarity always beat fear and frustration. So, hack number 3 is simple. Don't hide, show up. When you walk into that hearing armed with facts, the HOA loses its favorite weapon, your silence. Next, we'll move to hack number 4, where I'll show you how to use public records to keep your HOA accountable for every decision they make. Hack number 4, use public records to keep your HOA accountable. Here's something most homeowners don't realize. Your HOA isn't some secret organization. They're a registered legal entity, and by law, most of what they do is a matter of public record. That means you can see exactly how they operate, and sometimes how they break their own rules. Every HOA has to keep official records, budgets, meeting minutes, fine logs, and even correspondence about community decisions. And as a paying member, you have the right to inspect or request copies of those documents. This isn't snooping. It's your legal right as part of the association. Why does this matter? Because when an HOA fines you, they must have documentation showing how they decided it. If they can't produce that, or if the records show the board didn't follow procedure, that fine can be challenged and thrown out. For example, one homeowner requested meeting minutes after getting fined for a landscaping violation. Turns out the board never even voted on it. The president just decided on his own. Once she pointed that out using their own records, the fine disappeared within a week. So, how do you access this info? Start with your HOA's management company or board secretary. Ask politely in writing, "I'd like to review the association's meeting minutes and fine records related to my violation." They're legally required to provide them within a certain time frame, usually 10 to 30 days. If they ignore you, remind them that transparency laws protect homeowners from board secrecy. In most states, refusing access can actually put the HOA in violation of state law, not you. That's when they start cooperating quickly. And the best part, once they know you're reviewing records, they get cautious. They realize you're not just another easy target. You're informed, watching, and documenting everything they do. So, hack number 4 is all about accountability. Use their own records to make sure they follow the rules, because once the HOA knows you can see everything, they'll think twice before handing you another fine. Next, we'll finish strong with hack number 5, the move that can permanently stop unfair HOA harassment for good. Hack number 5, get everything in writing and build your paper trail. HOAs love to give verbal warnings or make side comments like, "Don't worry, we'll waive that fine," or "You don't need to appeal." But unless it's in writing, it doesn't exist. And when things escalate, they'll deny ever saying it. Written communication, whether by email or certified mail, is your protection. It creates a timeline, proof of what was said and when. That's crucial if you ever need to prove they acted unfairly or ignored procedure. Here's the power move. Whenever you talk to the HOA, follow up with a quick message. "Thanks for the call today. Just confirming what we discussed, that the fine will be reviewed at next week's meeting." One email like that locks the conversation into record. If they go back on their word later, you've got it documented. And don't just rely on your inbox. Make a folder for every HOA notice, every letter, every receipt. Name them by date. If a dispute ever goes further, small claims court, mediation, whatever, that organized trail can destroy their case instantly. I've seen people win against HOAs simply because they had a clear, documented history of communication, while the board had nothing but verbal claims and missing notes. Paper beats power, every time. And remember, when everything's in writing, they have to behave. They know their words could come back to bite them, so they tread lightly. That's how you shift the balance from fear to control.
So hack number 5 is your final shield. Document everything. Protect yourself. Because when you've got proof, you've already won. Now, let's wrap this up. Because if you've made it this far, you're no longer just a homeowner. You're someone the HOA will think twice before ever messing with again. You see, the HOA only wins when you stay silent, when you let fear or frustration make you give in. But now you know the truth. They're not untouchable. You have rights, you have leverage, and you have tools they never expected you to use. With these 5 legal hacks, knowing the rules, using their paperwork, showing up, checking records, and documenting everything, you've got a playbook that most homeowners don't even know exists. And that knowledge, that's your power. So the next time an HOA letter shows up in your mailbox, don't panic, smile, because you'll know exactly what to do step by step to make them back down and follow their own rules for once. If this video helped you, hit that like button so more homeowners can learn these tricks too. Drop a comment below if you've ever fought an unfair HOA fine. I want to hear your story. And make sure to subscribe because I've got more real HOA battles, crazy stories, and smart strategies coming next week. You don't have to let the HOA run your life. Stand up, stay informed, and take your community back one rule at a time. This is HOA Horror Stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, knowledge beats power every single time.
The HOA told me the house at the edge of our neighborhood didn't exist. They said it was condemned, unsafe, already removed from records. But I saw it every day. A boarded-up, rotting structure hidden behind their fence and their lies. And one night, when the boards rattled and a light flickered inside, I knew something was wrong. So I went in. What I found inside wasn't just a decaying house. It was the HOA's darkest secret.
Before that night, before the whispers about the abandoned building twisted into something more, my life was painfully ordinary. My name is Alex Johnson, 38 years old, husband, father, homeowner. Like most people, I thought moving into a nice suburban neighborhood with my family meant safety, stability, a fresh start. The place looked perfect on paper. Quiet streets, well-kept lawns, a community pool and playground, and of course, the HOA, the so-called guardians of community standards. They boasted about order, fairness, and keeping the neighborhood beautiful. At first, I believed them. Our house was comfortable. Emily, my wife, loved the open kitchen. Max, our 10-year-old son, finally had a backyard to run around in. For the first few weeks, I almost convinced myself we had found our dream home. But there was always one thing that didn't fit. At the far edge of the neighborhood, beyond a row of newly built houses and a chain-link fence, stood a structure the HOA refused to acknowledge. It wasn't on their maps. It wasn't mentioned in their glossy brochures. And if you asked about it at a meeting, the board members would wave you off, saying, "That's just a condemned site. Don't worry about it." But I worried. The building was old, much older than the rest of the development. 2 stories, slouched forward as if it carried centuries of secrets on its broken beams. The paint peeled in long strips, the windows were boarded, and the roof sagged under the weight of moss and decay. Yet something about it refused to disappear, like a scar on perfect skin. Whenever I drove past, Max would go quiet in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the house. "Why doesn't anyone fix it?" he asked once. I didn't know how to answer. Emily said it gave her chills, like it was watching us. At night, the place came alive in strange ways. Sometimes I swore I saw faint light slipping between the cracks of the boards. Sometimes, on still evenings, a sound carried across the empty lot, a groan of wood, a slam like a door forced shut, with a whisper of something moving inside. I mentioned it at an HOA meeting once. Margaret, the board president, froze for a moment before giving her polished smile. She was in her 50s, always in a sharp suit, hair perfect, voice dripping with authority. "There is no house there, Mr. Johnson," she said firmly. "That land is off limits. Dangerous. Please don't bring it up again." No house? I'd seen it. My family had seen it. We drove past it almost every day. How could she stand there and lie so effortlessly? That was the first hint that something about this neighborhood wasn't as perfect as it pretended to be. And little by little, that truth began bleeding into our lives, pulling us toward a confrontation we never asked for, but one we couldn't escape.
The first real crack appeared 3 weeks after I questioned Margaret about the abandoned house. It started small. A letter on break white HOA stationery slipped into my mailbox. Notice of non-compliance. Your lawn is 2.3 inches above approved length. You have 7 days to correct this violation or face fines. Ridiculous. I had just mowed the yard 2 days earlier.
Still, I shrugged it off and cut the grass again, thinking maybe the HOA was just strict. Then came the next letter. Violation. Unapproved mailbox paint must be rectified immediately. Then another. Trash bin visible from the street. $50 fine. It didn't stop. Every week, a new notice arrived. Emily joked that Margaret probably had binoculars trained on our house, but her laugh was tight, nervous. Max asked why we were in trouble all the time. I didn't have an answer. One evening after work, I drove past the abandoned building again. The sky was heavy with storm clouds, the last light of the sun bleeding red across the horizon. I slowed the car, staring at the dark silhouette leaning over the lot. For a moment, I swore I saw movement in one of the upstairs windows, just the faintest shadow slipping past. The next morning, another letter was waiting in the mailbox. No violation this time. Just a single line, handwritten instead of typed. Stay away from the old house. No signature, no HOA stamp. Just those 6 words. I took the letter inside and laid it on the kitchen counter. Emily's face went pale when she read it. This isn't just rules anymore, Alex. This is a threat. I wanted to agree, but something inside me rebelled. The more they pushed me away, the more I wanted to know why. Why deny the existence of a house we could all clearly see? Why warn me off? That night, I decided to go closer. I waited until nearly midnight when Emily and Max were asleep. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet, like the silence was listening. I slipped on my jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and walked down the road toward the fence that separated the houses from the condemned lot. The chain link sagged in the middle, easy enough to climb. As I dropped to the other side, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if the world itself didn't want me crossing this line. The building loomed ahead, broken and skeletal, yet somehow alive. I shined my flashlight on the rotted siding, paint curled like dead skin. A board had fallen away, leaving a gap big enough to peer through. And inside there were marks. Not graffiti, not the scrawls of bored teenagers. These were carved into the walls. Circles, triangles, jagged shapes that seemed to twist the longer I looked at them. My light flickered as if struggling against some unseen current. Then a sound echoed from within. Tap. 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 Slow. Deliberate. Like footsteps pacing just out of sight. I stumbled back, heart pounding. That's when I noticed it. A camera, new, shiny, mounted on a pole just outside the lot. Its lens pointed directly at me. Someone was watching. The next day, 3 men from the HOA showed up at my house. They didn't knock. They just stood on the sidewalk in their matching polos, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding their eyes. Margaret appeared a few minutes later. She smiled as though nothing was wrong, then handed me a thick envelope.
"We've decided to raise your annual HOA fees," she said smoothly. "Failure to comply will result in further action." I wanted to ask about the building, about the camera, about the letter. But her eyes were sharp, cold, daring me to speak. That night, Emily begged me to let it go. "They're targeting us, Alex, don't you see? If you keep pushing, they'll drive us out." Maybe she was right. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those strange markings on the wall. I heard that steady tap, tap, tap. And deep down, I knew. Whatever was in that abandoned house, the HOA wasn't just hiding it. They were protecting it. Or maybe serving it.
The second visit wasn't planned. It was a compulsion. One stormy night, lightning split the sky, and I saw the building silhouette burning against the horizon. I couldn't resist. I crossed the fence again, my flashlight shaking in my grip. The air inside was worse, thick with mold, dust, and something metallic. The carvings were everywhere, etched into the wood, the stone, even the floorboards. Circles within circles. And in the center of the basement floor, charred lines forming a crude ring. Blackened candles, melted long ago, sat at its edges. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Not outside, not behind me. Inside my head. "Leave." The flashlight went out. In the pitch dark, the tapping returned. Louder this time, coming closer. I scrambled toward the stairs, but before I reached them, headlights burst through a broken window. Outside, HOA trucks, men spilling out, flashlights sweeping the lot. Margaret's voice carried above the storm. "You weren't supposed to see this, Alex." I ducked behind a crumbling wall as footsteps thundered across the floor above me. "We kept you safe. All of you, and you had to dig." Her voice wasn't calm anymore. It was shrill, desperate. I bolted up the stairs, my breath ragged, and burst through the door. Rain poured down as Margaret and her board closed in. But then, the ground shook. The abandoned building groaned, wood splintering, as if something inside was waking up. The HOA members froze, their flashlights jerking toward the house. And in that moment of chaos, I ran. I didn't stop until I was back home, drenched, shaking, Emily clutching me as I collapsed at the door.
When the sirens faded and the squad cars rolled away with Margaret and her board, I thought, naively, that it was over. Neighbors whispered, the sheriff promised investigations, and demolition crews came. But the building wouldn't die. Equipment failed, chains snapped, workers quit. At night, the light in the window burned brighter. Max whispered that the lady in the window waved at him sometimes. And one night, I saw it too. Not a trick of the eye, not a shadow. A figure, standing in the window, waving. And this time, she wasn't waving at Max. She was waving at me.
They thought they had me cornered. The HOA claimed my car was a violation. Too old, too visible, not up to community standards. One morning, I walked outside and found the bright orange stickers slapped on my windshield. Tow notice. My stomach dropped. They gave me 48 hours before my car was gone forever. But here's the thing, I wasn't about to let them win. What they didn't know was that I had a plan, and when I executed it, the entire neighborhood watched them fall apart.
For years, I thought I'd found the perfect place to live. A quiet cul-de-sac, kids riding bikes until the streetlights flickered on, and neighbors who waved as they watered their lawns. On the surface, Oak Ridge Estates looked like a picture-perfect community, the kind you'd see in a glossy brochure. And at first, it really was. My wife Sarah and I had saved for years to buy our modest two-story home. The kind with a small front porch and just enough space for a garden that Sarah loved to tend. Our son Max would kick his soccer ball across the driveway, his laughter echoing in the still evening air. For a while, I convinced myself we'd found peace. But in Oak Ridge, peace always came with conditions. The HOA wasn't just a background presence. It was everywhere, written into the rules, whispered about at block parties, stamped into every monthly newsletter. They dictated the shade of beige you could paint your house. They fined people for leaving trash cans visible for more than an hour. They even held annual lawn audits. Yes, you heard that right. Clipboard inspections to ensure everyone's grass was exactly 2 inches tall. At first, I laughed it off. Sure, it was petty, but we could live with it. Most people did. After all, who wants to make enemies with the people who hold the power to find you into submission? But then the notices started. It began small. A warning tucked under my windshield about improper parking because my car's bumper supposedly edged past the invisible line of my driveway. Then came a letter about Sarah's flower pots. Non-compliant arrangement was the exact wording. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Almost. And yet, behind the laughter was something colder. Because it wasn't just about the rules. It was about control. The HOA, and especially its president, Margaret, the woman everyone quietly referred to as the Iron Fist in a cardigan, thrived on control. She had a reputation for turning neighborly disputes into written violations, for showing up uninvited to inspect backyards, and for filing complaints about things no normal person would ever notice. I tried to brush it off. I told myself not to take it personally, but I could feel it building, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. And then, one morning, I saw it. An orange sticker slapped across my windshield, a tow notice. My car, the same one I parked in my driveway every single day, was now deemed a community hazard. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a car. It was about pushing back against a system that thrived on intimidation. And I knew the fight was about to begin.
At first, I thought the orange tow sticker was a mistake. Maybe someone from the HOA had walked by too quickly, confused my car for a guest's, and slapped it on. Mistakes happen, right? But when I peeled it off the windshield and read the words stamped in bold, "Vehicle in violation, subject to towing within 48 hours, a chill crept through me. It wasn't a mistake. The letter that followed made that clear. The HOA claimed my car violated community parking compliance, a phrase so vague it could mean almost anything. I wasn't parked on the street. I wasn't blocking a hydrant. I wasn't even close to my neighbor's driveway. I was parked on my own property. Still, they insisted I move it or lose it. Sarah thought I was overreacting. Maybe just park in the garage, she said, trying to calm me down. But it wasn't that simple. My garage was already full, not with junk, but with the normal storage every family has. Bikes, tools, boxes of holiday decorations. The garage wasn't meant to fit both my car and our lives. And besides, why should I have to? This was my driveway, my property, my right. But the HOA didn't see it that way. Within days, more notices arrived. One for the non-compliant shrubbery Sarah had planted. Another for Max leaving his soccer ball in the yard overnight. Each violation carried a warning, and each warning carried the threat of fines. It felt deliberate, like they weren't just enforcing rules, they were testing me. The tension in the house grew heavier. Every time I opened the mailbox, I braced myself for another notice. Every time I saw Margaret walking her morning route with her clipboard, my stomach tightened. She didn't just glance at our house, she inspected it. Her eyes darted over every detail, like a hawk looking for prey. Then came the day I almost lost my car for good. It was a Saturday morning when I stepped outside and froze. A tow truck idled at the end of my driveway. The driver, a man in a neon vest, leaned against the door, clipboard in hand. He wasn't here by chance. He was here for my car. "Excuse me," I said, voice tight. "What do you think you're doing?" He didn't even look embarrassed. He just shrugged. "Got a call from the HOA. Said this vehicle's unauthorized. Papers are signed."
My chest pounded. Unauthorized? It was my car, my driveway, my home. I demanded to see the paperwork. Sure enough, stapled to the top was a notice stamped HOA Enforcement Authorization, and at the bottom, in a neat cursive signature, was Margaret's name. For a split second, I thought I'd lost. But then something clicked. I asked the driver a simple question. Do you see a city seal anywhere on that form? He frowned, looked again, shook his head. And that's because this isn't a government order. This is a private HOA trying to act like law enforcement. You tow my car, and you'll be in violation of state law. The man hesitated. He looked from the form to me, back to the car, then finally shoved the clipboard under his arm. Look, buddy, I don't get paid enough for this. Sort it out with your HOA. The tow truck rumbled away, leaving tire marks on the street. I'd won that round, but it was only the beginning. After that showdown, things escalated quickly. The HOA began flooding me with fines, $50 here, $100 there. Improper storage, unsightly appearance, failure to comply. Each one felt less like a rule and more like punishment for daring to fight back. When I refused to pay, they sent letters threatening liens on my house. Imagine that, losing your home not because you broke the law, but because you parked your car in your own driveway. Sarah tried to keep me calm, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Max stopped leaving his soccer ball outside, afraid it would get us fined again. Our home, once a place of comfort, had turned into a battlefield. And Margaret, she thrived on it. At the next HOA meeting, she stood at the podium, smiling smugly, as she announced new parking compliance initiatives. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, some nodding in agreement, others looking away, but no one spoke up. Margaret had ruled Oak Ridge Estates for years, and fear kept most people silent. But not me. When the meeting opened to residents, I raised my hand. Why are we being punished for parking in our own driveways? Show me where in the bylaws it says we can't. Margaret's smile never wavered. The bylaws grant the board discretion to enforce community standards, she replied smoothly. If your vehicle is deemed a nuisance, it may be subject to removal. A nuisance. That was the word she used. My car, the one I drove to work every day, the one that kept food on our table, was a nuisance. The room fell silent. And then Margaret leaned forward, voice low and cutting. Compliance is not optional, Mr. Miller. Either follow the rules or face the consequences. It was a threat, plain and simple. But I wasn't about to back down. I started documenting everything. Every notice, every fine, every encounter. I took photos, kept logs, and even recorded the tow attempt. If Margaret wanted a fight, I was going to give her one. Then came the moment that changed everything. One afternoon, as I sifted through another stack of HOA letters, I noticed something odd. The violation notices weren't just sloppy, they were identical. The same wording, the same format, even the same infractions repeated across different households. That's when I realized Margaret wasn't just targeting me, she was targeting everyone. I talked to neighbors, carefully, quietly, because trust was thin in Oak Ridge Estates. Some admitted they'd been fined for ridiculous things too. A garden gnome, a kid's bike left out overnight, even wind chimes. But most were too afraid to speak up. Then one night, a neighbor slipped me an envelope. Inside were copies of violation notices, the same ones I had, but dated months in advance. Pre-written, pre-stamped, ready to go before anyone had even done anything wrong. My hand shook as I read them. This wasn't enforcement. This was entrapment. And if Margaret was willing to fake violations, what else was she hiding? The pieces clicked into place. The secrecy, the threats, the identical notices. This wasn't about one car. This was about power, control, and profit. And suddenly, I knew. If I wanted to survive in Oak Ridge Estates, I couldn't just fight back quietly. I had to expose the system. That night, as I stared at the stack of evidence growing on my kitchen table, one thought echoed in my mind. If Margaret had her way, my car would already be gone. My home would be next. And yet deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than just me. Because once you pull back the curtain on power, you never know what you'll find. and I was about to find out.
The night before the HOA's big monthly meeting, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the pile of evidence spread out before me. Photos, letters, copies of violation notices that hadn't even been issued yet, but were already stamped and signed. Proof that Margaret and her inner circle weren't just enforcing rules, they were manufacturing them. My hands trembled as I organized everything into neat folders. For weeks, I had been the quiet target, absorbing their fines and threats, pushing back in whispers. But tomorrow, all of Oak Ridge Estates would see the truth. I didn't sleep that night. The meeting room was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls, every seat taken, neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder in the back. Margaret sat at the head of the table, clipboard resting like a weapon in front of her. She wore her usual smirk, the one that said she'd already won. Beside her sat the other board members, stiff-backed, eyes downcast. They rarely spoke. Margaret didn't need them to. The meeting droned on as usual. Landscaping budgets, pool hours, pet waste complaints. I watched as people shifted uncomfortably, half listening, half waiting for their chance to slip out the door. Then Margaret's voice sharpened. Next item on the agenda, vehicle compliance, specifically ongoing violations by Mr. Miller. Every head turned toward me. Margaret's smile widened. Despite repeated warnings, Mr. Miller continues to store his unauthorized vehicle in his driveway. The board has approved a final measure. Unless immediate compliance is achieved, a lien will be placed on his property. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even those who had avoided eye contact with me now looked horrified. A lien, the ultimate weapon. It wasn't just about fines or harassment anymore. This was about my home. I stood slowly, folder in hand. My voice was steady, but inside my chest my heart thundered like a war drum. "You're accusing me of violations," I said, locking eyes with Margaret. "But what about your violations?" A hush fell over the room. Margaret's smirk faltered for the first time. "I don't know what you think you're implying." I cut her off. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I opened the folder and held up the first page. "This is a violation notice I received last month for unsightly appearance. But take a closer look. The date on the bottom doesn't match the day it was issued. It was signed and stamped 2 months earlier." Murmurs spread through the room. Neighbors craned their necks to see. "And it's not just mine." I laid out more papers across the table, one after another. "Here are copies of violation notices given to multiple households, all of them signed, all of them stamped, before the supposed violations even happened." Gasps, whispers. Someone in the back muttered, "Wait, that looks just like mine." I didn't stop. I couldn't. This isn't enforcement. This is entrapment. Margaret and this board are manufacturing violations, planning fines in advance, punishing families for rules they haven't even broken yet. And I have proof. The room erupted. Some neighbors shouted in outrage, others demanded answers. The board members shifted uneasily in their seats, avoiding Margaret's glare. The walls of control she had built over years were cracking. But Margaret didn't back down. She rose to her feet, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Enough of this nonsense," she barked. "These documents are confidential HOA records. Mr. Miller has no right to them. He has trespassed, stolen property, and now dares to spread lies in this meeting." Her voice shook with fury. She was cornered, and she knew it. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, the ace I had kept hidden until now. "This," I said, holding up a single page, "isn't from me. It's from one of your own." The room fell silent again. This was slipped to me by a neighbor too afraid to speak out publicly. It's a memo, written by Margaret,
outlining a schedule of pre-written violations for the next quarter, specific homes, specific dates, and specific fines. I read out loud, Lot 17, unapproved paint color. Lot 23, lawn height. Lot 41, unauthorized vehicle. Each one signed and stamped in advance. I let the words hang in the air. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric. Neighbors exchanged wide-eyed glances. Some pulled out their phones, snapping photos. A woman in the back shouted, "That's my house number." Another cried out, "She fined me for that exact thing." Margaret's face drained of color. And then, in the most desperate move I'd ever seen, she lunged toward me, snatching for the folder. But before she could grab it, two neighbors stepped forward, blocking her path. "No," one of them said firmly. "We've had enough." The room erupted. Not in chaos, but in unity. Voices rose, not against me, but against her. Years of bottled-up resentment poured into the open. Complaints about petty fines, harassment, threats, all spilling into the open. "You fined me for a garden gnome," one man shouted. "You threatened to tow my daughter's car while she was visiting," another added. "My kid can't even leave his bike outside," someone else cried. Every voice was fuel to the fire, and Margaret was burning in it. Her composure shattered. She screamed over the crowd, "I am the board president. You will respect my authority." But her voice was drowned out by the wave of outrage. One board member finally stood, his voice trembling. "Margaret, this has gone too far. We can't support this anymore." Another followed, then another. In that moment, the board crumbled around her. Her allies, the very people she had relied on to back her every move, abandoned her under the weight of truth. Margaret stood alone. And I'll never forget the look in her eyes, a mixture of fury, disbelief, and fear. For years she had been untouchable, ruling with intimidation. But now, stripped bare in front of the very people she controlled, she was powerless. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply gathered the papers back into my folder and said the words that had been burning in my chest since the day this nightmare began. "You don't get to scare us anymore." The room erupted in applause. Neighbors stood, clapping, cheering, some even crying. The tide had turned, not because of me alone, but because the truth had finally come into the light. Margaret stormed out of the room, her heels clicking furiously against the tile. But the sound wasn't powerful anymore. It wasn't commanding. It was hollow. The Queen of Oak Ridge Estates had fallen. As the cheers died down, one thought echoed in my mind. The battle was over, but the war for our neighborhood's future had just begun.
The weeks after that HOA meeting felt unreal. For the first time in months, no letters on my door, no warnings, no threats, just silence. And slowly, I realized what that silence meant. Peace. Margaret's fall came quickly. Neighbors who'd once stayed quiet began speaking up, and by the next election, she was gone. The new board promised fairness and transparency, and they delivered. The playground reopened, the pool filled again, and for the first time, the neighborhood felt alive. Even when I'd see Margaret's car creeping by, her power was gone. She was just another bitter face in the crowd. Then came the video, our confrontation online for the world to see. It went viral, turning our small fight into a symbol. People everywhere shared their own HOA nightmares. And standing there, watering the flowers beside Sarah, hearing a neighbor thank me for standing up, I felt something new, pride. We didn't just reclaim our lawns or driveways, we reclaimed our right to live without fear. Because in the end, secrets don't stay buried forever, not even in a perfect-looking neighborhood. And sometimes, the most ordinary-looking neighborhood can hide the darkest stories.
So maybe the real question isn't whether I won against the HOA. The real question is, what about you? What's hiding in your neighborhood, behind closed doors, locked basements, or the fine print of HOA bylaws? Because one day, you might stumble onto something you were never meant to see. And when that happens, what will you do?
If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.
They fined me for my lawn. Seriously, a few blades of grass, and suddenly I was violating community standards. At first, I laughed it off until the fines started stacking up. 50 here, 100 there, all for having a yard cleaner than most on the block. That's when I decided to look closer. And what I discovered about our HOA president, her own little secret, hiding in plain sight, turned every smug warning into pure silence. That's when the real tables turned.
When I first moved into Oak Ridge Estates, it felt like the kind of neighborhood you only saw in real estate brochures. Perfectly trimmed hedges, pastel mailboxes, and families waving from driveways as if they'd all been cast for the same commercial. The lawns looked identical, the fences lined up like soldiers, and every house had that same soft beige glow under the morning sun. I'll admit, I liked it. After years of renting cramped apartments, buying my first home here felt like peace. My wife, Sarah, planted flowers near the porch. Our son, Max, chased his soccer ball across the yard. For the first time, life felt predictable in the best way. That's when I learned predictability can be dangerous, especially in a place where perfection isn't just admired, it's enforced. The HOA wasn't some friendly group that handled maintenance and holiday decorations. It was more like a quiet surveillance network with clipboards and bylaws. Every month, a new reminder landed in our mailbox. Rules about fence paint, garbage timing, mailbox polish, even the acceptable range of grass height. I thought it was ridiculous, but most neighbors nodded along like it was normal. And at the center of it all was her, Margaret, the HOA president. Mid-50s, sharp haircut, the kind of smile that made you feel judged before you even said hello. She ran the community like a private kingdom, with her little team of loyal board members, all eager to please her. Rumor had it she'd been re-elected 6 times, and no one had ever dared to run against her. At first, I kept my head down. I paid my dues, mowed my lawn, waved when she passed by in her golf cart patrols. I thought if I followed the rules, I'd be fine. But Margaret had a talent for finding problems where none existed. It started with friendly notices. One for leaving my trash bins out too long, even though the pickup truck had been delayed that morning. Another for having a small garden hose visible from the street. Then came the one that would start it all. Violation. Lawn not in compliance with community appearance standards. I remember staring at that line, genuinely confused. My lawn was healthy, green, freshly trimmed. In fact, I had just mowed it that morning. The notice didn't explain what was non-compliant. It didn't have photos or measurements, just a warning, signed by Margaret herself. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe it was a clerical mistake. But a week later, another letter came, this time with a $50 fine attached, then $100, then $150. Each one colder, more formal, and more absurd than the last. When I asked around, a few neighbors just shook their heads. One whispered, "You don't want to get on Margaret's bad side." Another admitted he'd paid a $75 fine for overwatering. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about lawns. It was about control. Something about me, maybe standing up or asking questions, must have made her a new project. And if Margaret wanted a battle, she was about to get one. Because unlike everyone else, I wasn't afraid to push back, and I had a few tricks of my own. The first fine was almost funny. The second was frustrating. By the third, it wasn't funny anymore. Each envelope from the HOA came printed on crisp white paper with the same header: Notice of Violation, Failure to Maintain Community Standards. Each one arrived exactly 7 days apart, like clockwork, with a new fee tacked on. The reasons were vague: lawn discoloration, uneven cut, overgrowth detected. Overgrowth? My grass was barely 3 inches tall. I used the same mower setting I'd always used. Sarah told me to ignore it, to not let them get under my skin. But that's exactly what Margaret wanted. It wasn't about the lawn, it was about control. When I called the HOA office, her assistant, a timid man named Carl, mumbled that the board had received multiple complaints. When I asked from whom, he said that information was confidential. Convenient. I asked for an inspection in person. Margaret refused, saying the photos on file were sufficient proof. I requested to see them. She said they were internal records. Every question hit a wall. And that's when I realized the HOA wasn't built to serve homeowners. It was built to protect itself. The following week, I started documenting everything. Every time I mowed, every letter, every notice, photos with timestamps, dates of calls. If they wanted to play games, I'd play smarter. But it didn't stop there. They escalated. One morning, I woke up to find a bright orange stake in my yard. Inspection notice pending. The neighbors stared as they drove by. Later, I overheard 2 of them whispering, "That's the guy who got fined again." Humiliation. That's what it was really about. Make one person the example, and everyone else falls in line. The next HOA newsletter even had a section titled Maintaining Community Pride. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. There was a paragraph about certain properties failing to uphold expected standards, complete with a photo that looked suspiciously like my street corner. I'd had enough, so I started digging. HOA bylaws are public, or at least partially. Late nights I sat in my office flipping through PDFs and scanned pages buried on their website, page after page of jargon, until one small detail jumped out. All properties are subject to biannual lawn evaluations by a certified inspector. Certified inspector. Interesting. Margaret's inspection reports had no signatures, no third-party documentation, nothing that proved they'd ever been done by anyone but her or her loyal board members. I began walking around the neighborhood in the evenings, just observing. Most lawns looked fine, some even worse than mine. Overgrown edges, patchy spots, weeds in the cracks, and yet no orange stakes, no warnings, no fines. One lawn in particular caught my eye, Margaret's. Her front yard had brown spots near the edges, dead patches under the hedge, and, unbelievably, a broken sprinkler head leaking water down her driveway. I took photos, dated them, saved them all. The hypocrisy burned. The following week, I overheard Carl, her assistant, talking outside the community center. He mentioned that the HOA's inspection forms weren't being verified anymore because Margaret said it wasn't necessary this quarter. My suspicion turned into certainty. She was fabricating violations. The next week, I received the one more letter. This time, an ultimatum. Failure to pay fines within 14 days will result in a lien being placed on your property. That was it, the line I wouldn't let them cross. I printed every photo, every timestamp, every message. Then I made one more visit to the county records office. It turns out Margaret's property had already been cited by the city once before for improper irrigation drainage, something she'd conveniently left out of her HOA reports. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was prepared. So,
When the next HOA meeting rolled around, I made sure to show up early. The parking lot was packed. Neighbors, board members, even the landscaper. Everyone signed in, collected their agenda, and took their seats. Margaret stood at the front like a queen before her subjects, clipboard in hand, smiling that same tight smile she'd always worn before issuing bad news. I sat quietly, waiting for my turn to speak. She had no idea what was coming.
The room buzzed with low murmurs as the meeting began. Folding chairs lined the walls. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly, and the faint hum of the air conditioner couldn't drown out the tension that hung thick in the air. Margaret stood at the front, her voice crisp and self-assured. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin tonight's meeting by addressing ongoing concerns regarding lawn maintenance compliance. Our goal, as always, is to preserve the beauty and value of Oak Ridge Estates. Her words dripped with polished authority, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Heads suddenly turned in my direction. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. Margaret continued, flipping through her clipboard. Unfortunately, we've had repeated non-compliance issues at several properties. I raised my hand. Before you continue, I have a few questions. Her smile faltered just a little. You'll have your turn during open floor comments. With respect, I said, standing up, this concerns me directly, and since my name's been mentioned in every notice you've sent for the past month, I think we can skip the formality. The crowd shifted. A few neighbors whispered. Some smirked knowingly. Margaret hesitated, but gestured stiffly. Fine, you have 2 minutes. Perfect, I said, because that's all I'll need. I pulled out a thick folder and laid it on the table. The sound of paper hitting wood echoed through the room. These, I said, are every notice, photo, and inspection report you've sent me, and I've compared them against the HOA bylaws. I flipped open a page, highlighting a section with yellow marker. Section 7.4. Lawn evaluations must be conducted by a certified third-party inspector. Can you tell us who conducted mine? Margaret blinked. The board handles that internally. So, not certified? I asked, my tone sharp. We've always done it this way. Then you've always been breaking your own rules. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. I could see Carl, her assistant, shrinking in his chair. Margaret's face flushed. Mr. Anderson, this isn't a courtroom. No, I said, stepping forward, but it might become one. I held up another sheet. Because according to county records, your own property was cited by the city last year for irrigation runoff. That's a real violation. Yet you're fining others for grass height? Her lips tightened. That's irrelevant. Oh, it's very relevant, I shot back. You fined me over $600 for a lawn that meets all city codes. You've harassed my family, embarrassed us publicly, and used your position to settle personal grudges. You violated your own bylaws, and I've got the evidence to prove it. The room went silent. For the first time, Margaret looked uncertain. She shuffled the papers in her hand, glancing toward the other board members, but they avoided her eyes. One of them, an older man named Dennis, cleared his throat. Is this true, Margaret? Were the inspections handled without certification? She hesitated. It's standard practice. That's not an answer, Dennis pressed. The crowd began whispering louder now. Someone muttered, I knew it. Another said, she fined me for flower pots last year. Margaret tried to regain control. Let's all remain civil. These accusations are baseless, and I cut her off. Baseless. I have photographic proof. I turned my laptop around, connected to the projector they'd used earlier. The screen flickered the life, and one by one I showed time-stamped photos, my lawn perfectly trimmed, her yard, brown patches and all, and a screenshot of the city citation tied to her property. Gasps filled the room. She took a step back. You had no right. I had every right, I said. You made it personal first. You weaponized your position against your neighbors, and now the truth's out. Sarah squeezed my arm. I could feel her shaking, whether from nerves or pride, I wasn't sure. The HOA president, an elderly woman who'd been quiet until now, finally spoke. Margaret, until this matter is reviewed, I'm suspending your authority over code enforcement. The room erupted. Some clapped, others whispered in disbelief. Margaret looked like she'd been slapped. "This isn't over," she hissed, grabbing her bag. "No," I said softly, "it's just beginning." She stormed out, the door slamming behind her. For the first time in months, I felt the tension leave my shoulders. Neighbors approached me afterwards, people I'd barely spoken to before. "Good for you," one said. "She's been bullying everyone for years," another whispered. "About time someone stood up." And just like that, the power shifted. The meeting ended not with Margaret's voice echoing through the room, but with quiet conversations among people finally realizing how much control they'd given away. When we walked back home under the glow of the streetlights, Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. "You really did it," she said. I nodded, though I knew it wasn't completely over. HOAs have a way of clinging to power. But something had cracked. Her authority, her image, maybe even the fear she built the whole system on. For the first time, Oak Ridge Estates felt just a little freer.
The morning after the meeting felt unreal. For the first time in months, there were no envelopes on my door, no threats in the mailbox, just sunlight, sprinklers, and silence. Neighbors who once avoided me now waved. Even the ones who used to whisper looked relieved, like a weight had finally lifted. Margaret's grip on Oak Ridge Estates had finally cracked. Within a week, word spread fast. Dozens of residents shared their own stories. Fines for trash cans, flower pots, even holiday lights. The absurdity of it all became too obvious to ignore. At the next HOA meeting, without Margaret, the tone was completely different. Dennis, one of the older board members, stood up and said, "The rules were meant to protect this neighborhood, not control it. We lost sight of that." Applause broke out. The board voted to rewrite the bylaws. No fines without third-party verification. No anonymous complaints. Every major rule now required a resident vote. For the first time, the HOA felt like a community again. Margaret quietly resigned soon after. Rumor was she'd been caught mishandling HOA funds. Poetic, really. By summer, Oak Ridge Estates looked alive again. Lawns weren't identical anymore. Kids played outside. People talked over fences instead of complaining through letters. I put a small sign on my lawn that read, "Freedom grows here." Neighbors smiled when they saw it. Some even made their own. The tension was gone. The fear was gone. And for the first time, our neighborhood felt like it actually belonged to the people who lived in it, not the ones who ruled it. A few weeks later, a clip from the meeting went viral online. Thousands watched Margaret's downfall, and strangers shared their own HOA nightmares. It wasn't just about lawns anymore. It was about standing up when something small becomes something wrong. The story ended the way it should, with peace, not paperwork. And sometimes, when I water the grass at sunset, I think back to that first violation notice, the one that started it all, and I smile. Because in the end, I didn't just win against an HOA, I reminded an entire neighborhood that they could say no. They tried to control every blade of grass, but in the end, all it took was one homeowner to remind them who really owned the ground beneath it.
If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it. They call it a homeowners association, but sometimes it feels more like a homeowners ambush. Every year, thousands of homeowners are tricked, bullied, and intimidated into paying fines and fees that never should have existed in the first place. Mysterious maintenance charges, hidden violation penalties, even bogus late fees for bills you already pay. And the worst part, it's all hidden behind official letters stamped with authority, the kind that make most people pay first and ask questions never. But not anymore, because today we're pulling the curtain back. These are the 5 biggest HOA scams that homeowners keep falling for, and exactly how you can spot them before they hit your wallet. So before you send another check, before you repaint that fence, or apologize for something you didn't even do, watch this. Because once you learn what really goes on behind those HOA doors,
you'll never look at that violation notice the same way again.
Here's the truth most homeowners never hear. HOAs weren't designed to be your enemy. When they started decades ago, they were meant to protect property values and keep neighborhoods clean. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Power, money, and control took over. And what used to be a group of friendly volunteers turned into many dictatorships with letterheads. I've seen it too many times. A family fined hundreds of dollars for a non-compliant flower bed. A veteran told to remove his flag. A widow charged monthly fees for a fence that never existed. The pattern is always the same. The HOA uses vague rules, hidden clauses, and fear tactics to make you comply or pay. And when you question them, they bury you in paperwork, threats, and official notices. It's a system built on silence, and most homeowners stay quiet because they think they have no choice. But once you understand the scams behind the structure, you'll see how fragile their power really is. Because here's the dirty secret. Most HOAs rely on intimidation, not law. Their authority collapses the moment you know your rights, their procedures, and where they've bent the rules. And that's exactly what we're exposing today. From fake fines to secret service charges and even illegal liens, these are the 5 scams that keep homeowners paying out of fear instead of fairness. So take a breath, grab your violation letters, and get ready. Because what you're about to learn could save you thousands and a lot of stress.
Scam number 1, the phantom fine trick. When your HOA charges you for something that doesn't even exist, it starts the same way for almost everyone. You walk out to the mailbox, pull out a white envelope with your HOA's logo, and inside you see it. Notice of violation. Maybe it's for unapproved landscaping or a fence discrepancy. Sometimes it's something as absurd as untrimmed grass near community walkway. The fine? $100, maybe $250. But here's the kicker. It's completely fabricated. No inspection report, no time-stamped photos, no written proof. Just a letter with an amount and a threat. Failure to pay may result in additional penalties or legal action. That's the phantom fine trick, one of the oldest and most profitable HOA scams still running today. See, most HOAs rely on one simple thing: fear. They know the average homeowner doesn't want drama. You've got work, kids, bills. The last thing you want is a fight with your own neighborhood board. So most people just pay. And that's exactly what the HOA wants. Because once you pay even one phantom fine, you've set a precedent. You've told them you'll comply, even without proof. Here's what most homeowners don't know. In nearly every state, HOAs are legally required to provide evidence before enforcing a fine. That means they must document the violation, include the date, the rule violated, and the method of inspection. If they skip any of those steps, the fine is invalid. But HOAs rarely expect you to call them out on it. I once read a case out of Arizona. A homeowner was fined over $900 for unauthorized driveway oil stains. He demanded photographic proof, the inspection date, and the specific bylaw section. The HOA couldn't produce a single document. The result? Every fine was erased, and the HOA had to issue a written apology. And yet thousands of homeowners never question it. They pay, they repaint, they replant, they obey. And the HOA keeps the scam rolling. So here's how you protect yourself. Every time you receive a violation notice, calmly respond in writing. Please provide the photographic evidence, inspection record, and the specific bylaw clause supporting this alleged violation. That one sentence turns the tables instantly. Because HOAs hate paper trails, and when you demand one, they panic. It's not about being rude or rebellious.
It's about demanding transparency. The phantom fine trick only works if you stay quiet. So the next time that envelope lands in your mailbox, don't pay for a ghost. Ask for proof and watch the scam disappear. Scam number 2, the maintenance fee mirage. When your HOA says it's for repairs, but nothing ever gets fixed. You've seen it on your HOA statement 100 times. Monthly maintenance fee, $125. Community repair fund, $200. Sounds reasonable, right? After all, they need to maintain the neighborhood, mow the lawns, fix the lights, repaint the gates. But what if I told you that in thousands of HOA communities across the country, that money never actually goes where they say it does? Welcome to the maintenance fee mirage, the second biggest scam HOAs quietly pull off every single month. Here's how it works. The HOA board collects money under maintenance, repairs, or infrastructure improvements. They promise it'll cover landscaping, pool repairs, street lights, all those shared spaces you rarely use but still have to pay for. But behind the scenes, those funds are often redirected, used for attorney retainers, administrative bonuses, consulting fees, or even luxury upgrades for board members' pet projects. One Florida HOA association was exposed when residents found out their so-called maintenance fund was being used to pay for the president's private home security cameras. Think that's rare? It's not. In California, an HOA charged residents $250 a month for landscaping improvements. But after 3 years, not a single new plant, no fresh paint, no paving repairs. Residents finally demanded to see the financial statements, which by law, HOAs must make available to all members. What they found was shocking. Tens of thousands spent on administrative consulting to a company owned by one of the board members' relatives. And that's the secret. Most HOAs never ask for records. They assume the money is being handled properly. But in many states, you have the legal right to inspect HOA budgets, reserve funds, and even transaction records. It's your money. You're paying for the community's upkeep, not their side hustles. Here's what you can do right now. Step 1. Send a written request for the HOA's latest annual budget and reserve fund report. Step 2. Ask specifically for maintenance and landscaping expenditures broken down by vendor. Step 3. Compare it with what you actually see in your neighborhood. If the HOA says $30,000 went to landscaping, but your lawns look like a desert, something's wrong. Don't let them intimidate you with jargon like proprietary or classified financials. That's your neighborhood, your money, your right to know. The maintenance fee mirage works only if you keep trusting blindly. Start asking questions, and you'll be amazed how quickly that mirage starts to fade. Scam number 3, the attorney fee ambush. How HOAs secretly turn a $50 fine into thousands in legal debt. You check your mailbox and see that dreaded envelope again. Violation notice. This time it's something small. Maybe your grass was a little too tall, or your trash bin sat out an extra day. You sigh, read the $50 fine, and think, whatever, I'll handle it later. But a month later, boom, you get another letter. Only this time, the fine isn't $50 anymore. It's $480. And at the bottom, a chilling line. Includes legal fees and administrative costs. Wait, legal fees? You never even spoke to a lawyer. Here's the scam. Many HOAs hire collection law firms that profit by piling on fees every time they send you a notice, reminder, or threat. These lawyers don't represent you. They represent the HOA, but you end up footing their bill. It starts innocent, like, we've referred your case to our attorney. But in the fine print, it says, all legal costs incurred by the association shall be the responsibility of the homeowner. That's where they trap you. Suddenly, every letter costs you $75. Every update, another $100. By the time you realize what's happening, a minor violation has snowballed into thousands of dollars, and you're being threatened with a lien on your home. In Arizona, A homeowner shared how a $200 landscaping fine turned into a $4,700 bill once legal fees were tacked on. The law firm never went to court, they just sent form letters. Yet the HOA insisted she owed it all. This happens because Boyds often rubber stamp attorney involvement without a formal vote. And here's the truth. If the HOA didn't properly authorize that legal action in writing, or if the law firm didn't follow due process, those fees are not legally collectible. Here's what you do instead of panicking. 1. Request an itemized statement of all charges, every hour, every letter, every fee. 2. Ask for the board meeting minutes that show when and how they approved the attorney's involvement. If they can't produce either, respond calmly that you dispute all legal charges due to lack of proper authorization. That one single move can freeze the collection process cold. Because no lawyer wants to get caught overbilling or acting without official approval. Remember, intimidation is their weapon. Transparency is yours. When you shine a light on the hidden math behind those fees, the whole scare tactic collapses. That's scam number 3, the attorney fee ambush, the quiet trick that turns homeowners into ATM machines until someone like you says, "Prove it." Scam number 4, the privacy trap, how HOAs spy, stalk, and profit off your data. It starts small, a friendly email from your HOA portal. Please update your contact information for community safety. Seems innocent, right? But what most homeowners don't realize is that every time you log in, pay dues online, or fill out a violation appeal form, your personal data is being harvested, tracked, and sometimes sold, all under the HOA's name. This isn't paranoia, it's policy.
Many management companies partner with third-party apps that store your name, phone number, address, payment history, even the frequency of your complaints. Some even monitor license plate data through gate cameras or parking permit systems. And buried deep in the fine print, by using this platform, you consent to data sharing with our service partners. Those partners can include analytics firms, insurers, or even local vendors who pay for access to resident insights. So while you think you're just logging in to check your balance, the HOA's tech stack might be quietly building a digital profile of your life. When you're home, when you're not, and what you complain about most. Here's where it crosses the line. A Colorado homeowner discovered her HOA board president was using security camera footage to track which residents attended meetings critical of him. In Texas, another HOA's community safety app exposed residents' names, addresses, and vehicle details online, indexed by Google for months. No one told them, no one asked permission. Why? Because HOAs claim they're private entities, not bound by the same transparency or data protection laws as government agencies. That loophole lets them gather and store your information indefinitely, often with no cybersecurity policy at all. And when a management company changes hands, your data, your payment records, emails, even photos can be sold along with the contract to the next firm. You become just another asset. Here's how to protect yourself. Opt out of app-based payment systems. Pay by check if possible. Request the HOA's data handling policy. Most don't have one, which tells you everything. Demand deletion of your information when switching platforms or after you sell your home. Because privacy isn't paranoia, it's protection. Your HOA may control the lawns and gates, but they have no right to control your personal life. That's scam number 4, the privacy trap. The invisible invasion where homeowners lose not just money, but their right to be left alone. Scam number 5, the board's double standard game, when favoritism decides who gets fined and who doesn't. Ever wonder why your neighbor can build a backyard gazebo, but you get fined for a bird bath? It's not a mistake, it's favoritism. Many HOA boards are made up of volunteers with friends, allies, and grudges. And when those people hold the power, enforcement becomes personal. Some homeowners get warnings, others get slammed with fines. That's not enforcement, that's manipulation. The scam? They use rules as weapons to reward their favorites and punish anyone who dares to question them. You might think it's just petty, but it's strategic. The HOA knows most people won't fight back because it feels like a lost cause. But legally, this kind of selective enforcement, especially when it's personal, can void their authority entirely. If you can prove bias or inconsistency, you can not only overturn fines, you can expose the board's corruption. The key is documentation. Dates, photos, correspondence. When you show a pattern of rules for some, excuses for others, you've uncovered the rot inside the HOA system. That's scam number 5, the board's double standard game where power turns into personal politics and your only defense is shining a light on their hypocrisy. Outro. Take back your power. So now you know, the truth your HOA desperately hoped you'd never figure out. Those rules they throw at you? Half the time they're smoke and mirrors, designed to intimidate, confuse, and control. From inflated fees and shady fines to secret data collection and timing tricks, every scam follows the same pattern. Power over people who don't know they have a choice. But you're not one of them anymore. You've seen behind the curtain. You've learned how to read their bylaws, spot their scams, and challenge their authority using their own paperwork. That's not rebellion, that's real ownership. Because being a homeowner isn't about following orders from a board. It's about protecting what you've earned, your home, your privacy, your dignity. So next time an HOA letter shows up in your mailbox, don't flinch, don't panic. Pause, then smile, because now you know how the game works. If this opened your eyes, hit that like button so more homeowners can wake up too. And make sure to subscribe because this was just the beginning. The next episode dives even deeper into real cases where homeowners fought back and won. Remember, knowledge isn't rebellion, it's self-defense. Take back your power. Take back your home.
Get to higher ground. The water is rising fast. Move!
They built 55 homes on land that wasn't theirs. My land. They ignored my letters, silenced my warnings, and mocked my claims. And when the bulldozers carved up my soil, the HOA president said to my face, "This community will rise with or without you." But they forgot something. Land has memory, and water never forgets where it's meant to flow. So when the day came, I stood on the ridge, hand on the wheel of the dam's floodgate, watching those homes stand tall in arrogance. And with one motion, I reminded them all who this land really belonged to. What would you have done?
Before all of that, before the cameras and the lawsuits and the flood that changed everything, life here seemed calm. My name is David Harper, mid-40s, modest man, someone who never wanted to be the center of attention. My property wasn't a mansion or a sprawling estate. It was a modest farmhouse, 2 stories tucked into the valley. My land stretched wider than most people in the county realized because it bordered the ridge where the old dam had been built decades ago. That dam wasn't just concrete and steel to me. It was history. My father helped maintain it, and his father before him. It wasn't government-owned, it wasn't public property, it was private, mine. The land, the water it held back, the valley below, it had been deeded to my family generations ago. But as time passed, suburbs spread, roads lengthened. What had once been quiet farmland slowly transformed. New homeowners arrived, and with them, the machine of progress, the HOA. They came with shiny brochures, promises of community spirit, and visions of new housing developments. To many, they sounded like opportunity. To me, they sounded like intrusion. At first, it was harmless enough. New fences, sidewalks, a neighborhood watch. But with every new family came new construction, edging closer and closer to my boundary line. I could see it from my porch, rooftops sprouting like weeds.
their laughter carried across the valley, their lights polluting the night I once knew as dark and still. I tried to live with it. I told myself the world changes and you adapt. But then the HOA sent their first letter. It was polite at first, asking me to consider aligning with the community's shared vision by removing my barn. My barn, a structure older than their HOA charter, sitting proudly on my side of the property line. They said it was unsightly. I said it was mine. That was the beginning, a small seed of conflict planted in fertile soil. What I didn't know was just how deep their roots of arrogance would dig.
The letters didn't stop. They multiplied. First about the barn, then about the state of my property. They claimed my unpaved driveway didn't meet community standards. They wanted me to install a fence that matched theirs. They even complained about the color of my home's siding. Never mind that I wasn't part of their HOA, never signed their contracts, never agreed to their rules. I laughed the first time I read their demands, but laughter turned to frustration as the fines started arriving. Envelopes stacked high, each threatening more action, each bolder than the last. I threw them out at first, then I called, then I showed up at one of their board meetings. That's when I met him, Richard Lawson, HOA president. Mid to late 50s, slick gray hair combed back, wire-frame glasses perched perfectly on his nose, and a smug smile that never seemed to leave his face. He wore authority like armor, strutting around in his navy blazer and red tie like a king holding court. When I confronted him, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Mr. Harper, this community operates under majority rule. You may not like it, but progress doesn't wait for one man." One man. That's all I was to him. An obstacle, an inconvenience, something to bulldoze. I walked out of that meeting with my fists clenched. And days later, the bulldozers came. At first, I thought they were working nearby, expanding the roads, laying new foundations. But then I realized where the trucks were heading. My land, the ridgeline, the valley, 55 homes. They didn't just encroach, they invaded. Without my consent, without my approval, they staked claims on property that belonged to me. I sent letters, they went unanswered. I called lawyers. They told me to prepare for a long, expensive battle. I even called the county, but the HOA had greased the right palms. Permits had been lost, signatures found, boundaries adjusted. On paper, it looked legitimate, but I knew the truth. They had stolen it. And every day, I watched as frame after frame rose. Families cheered as they toured their new homes. The HOA president stood proudly at ribbon cuttings, shaking hands, grinning for cameras, his empire expanding on the back of theft. Inside, rage built. I barely slept. I barely ate. Every glance from my porch reminded me of what they had taken. But worse than the theft was the arrogance. Because Richard came to my door one evening. He handed me another letter, smiling as he said, "You should be grateful, David. We've increased the value of this whole area. You'll thank us one day." I slammed the door in his face, and that night I stood at the dam, hand on the wheel, staring at the floodgates, thinking, planning. Could I really do it? Could I really unleash what waited behind those walls? For weeks, I wrestled with the thought, until the day came when a final letter arrived, one that broke me completely. It wasn't about the barn, or the siding, or the driveway. It was an order, an eviction notice, signed by the board, led by Richard Lawson. They weren't just taking the land, they were taking my home.
That was the night I made my decision.
The sky was gray when I walked the ridge. Clouds heavy, the air damp with the scent of rain. Below me, 55 homes stood neatly arranged, their streets clean, their lawns green. A picture-perfect neighborhood built on lies. I carried the crumpled eviction notice in my pocket, my fingers clenched around it like a talisman of rage. At the dam, the wheel loomed before me, rusted, massive, silent. My hand trembled as I gripped it. Voices echoed in my mind. Richard's smug tone, the lawyer's dismissals, the neighbor's laughter. And then, silence. The silence of decision.
I turned the wheel. The groan of metal filled the air as the floodgates creaked open. At first, just a trickle, then a roar. A torrent surged forward, white and furious, tearing through the valley with unstoppable force. From the ridge, I watched as water swallowed streets. Fences snapped, cars floated, families screamed, scrambling onto rooftops. And at the center of it all, Richard Lawson stood on a porch, shouting orders no one could hear, his navy blazer clinging to him in the rain, his empire drowning before his eyes.
Move!
In that moment, I felt everything at once.
The water
Rage,
is rising fast.
relief,
Move!
fear, power. The homes they built on my land were gone in minutes. And when the floodwaters settled, silence returned. A silence heavier than any storm. The aftermath was chaos. Reporters descended. Lawsuits erupted. The HOA pointed their fingers at me, branding me reckless, dangerous. But as investigations unfolded, the truth surfaced. Forged permits, shady deals, corruption at every level. Richard Lawson became the face of disgrace, his smug smile replaced with a hollow stare as his empire crumbled. Families turned against him, investors abandoned him, and the HOA dissolved under the weight of its own greed. Me? I didn't walk away unscathed. I faced fines, restrictions, endless debates over whether I was a villain or a hero. To some, I was reckless. To others, a hero. But I knew one thing. I had reclaimed what was mine. The land healed. Grass grew again. Birds returned. Nature rebuilt where arrogance had failed. And as I stood once more on the ridge, looking at the quiet dam, I knew concrete wasn't just stone. It was memory. People across the country heard my story. Homeowners trapped under HOA control began asking questions, pushing back, standing taller. They saw that one man, even against 55 homes, could fight back. That's the legacy. Not the water, not the wreckage, not me. The legacy is this. When power builds on stolen ground, it should never be surprised when the ground itself rises to wash it away. So I ask you, if 55 homes stood on your land, if every plea was silenced, every letter ignored, every right stripped away, what would you have done? Would you have let them take everything? Or would you have opened the floodgates and let justice flow? Because sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms. Sometimes it comes in waves.
If you enjoyed seeing justice served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.
I couldn't believe it. A letter from my HOA.
saying my American flag was a community violation. They claimed it was too big, too bright, and that it disrupted the neighborhood's aesthetic. I stood there staring at that paper, thinking, since when did loving my country become a problem? At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. But when I reached out to the HOA, they didn't back down. They doubled down, threatening daily fines if I didn't take my flag down immediately. That's when I realized this wasn't about a flag. It was about control. And I decided enough was enough.
I've always believed that your home should tell your story. Mine isn't the biggest house in the neighborhood, not by a long shot, but it's the one I poured my heart into. I painted every wall, planted every flower, and built the porch swing myself. Every detail in that place holds a memory. And right out front, standing tall, is my American flag. It's been there since the day I moved in, waving proudly in the morning breeze, catching the light of every sunrise. To me, it's not just decoration. It's a reminder of sacrifice, hard work, and the freedom that makes all of this possible. Neighbors would often nod or smile as they walked by. Some even mentioned how good the flag looked with the way the morning sun hit it. I never once thought it could bother anyone. It was just part of my home, like the oak tree in the yard, or the sound of kids riding bikes down the street. Then one morning, I opened my front door and saw an envelope taped right to it. White, official-looking paper, sealed with the HOA logo at the top. At first, I thought it was something minor, maybe a reminder about trash bins or community parking rules. But when I opened it and started reading, my stomach dropped. Your property is in violation of Section 4.2 Exterior Display Regulations. Please remove the American flag from your front yard immediately. Failure to comply may result in daily fines. I actually laughed out loud at first, thinking it had to be some kind of mistake. A flag violation? That couldn't be real. Maybe someone on the board got confused, or maybe they meant something else. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I reached out. I emailed the HOA office that same day, attaching a photo of the flag, politely asking if there'd been a misunderstanding. I even quoted part of the US flag code, thinking that would clear things up quickly. A few hours later, I got a reply. Short, cold. No greeting, no explanation. Your flag is not in compliance with community aesthetic standards. Please remove it within 10 days to avoid penalties. That's it. No discussion, no reasoning, just an ultimatum. I couldn't believe it. The flag wasn't oversized. It wasn't blocking anything. It wasn't even lit at night, which I later realized was one of their complaints. Still, I replied again, trying to be civil, asking for a conversation. The next day, another message arrived. This time it said, failure to comply will result in daily fines of $100 until the violation is resolved. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the flag at all. This was about control. And I wasn't about to let them win that easily.
After that second letter from the HOA, I started to realize this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a power play. They weren't interested in talking. They wanted obedience. At first, I thought maybe I was the only one being targeted. Maybe someone on the board had a personal issue with me or just didn't like the sight of the flag out front. But a few days later, as I was mowing the lawn, I noticed something strange. Across the street, my neighbor Bill, a retired Marine, had taken down his flag. I stopped the mower and walked over. "Hey, Bill, what happened to your flag?" I asked. He sighed, shaking his head. "Got one of those letters last week. They said mine was too high. Said it didn't meet the height limit for poles. I didn't want the hassle, so I just took it down." That hit me harder than I expected.
Bill's flag had been flying there for years, long before the current HOA board was even formed. And now it was gone, all because of a few people with too much authority and too little sense. Later that evening, I took a walk around the neighborhood, and what I saw made my stomach turn. House after house, where flags used to wave proudly, the poles were empty. No red, no white, no blue, just bare metal or green patches of grass where they'd been removed. It wasn't just me. The HOA had gone after everyone. I decided to call the HOA office directly. When I finally got through, they told me the president was available for comments during the next open meeting. I marked it on my calendar. When that day came, I showed up early. The meeting room was in the community clubhouse. Beige walls, stiff folding chairs, and that faint smell of burnt coffee. I sat near the front and waited. When they called my name, I stood up and calmly explained what was happening. I read the letter they sent me, quoted the law that protects the right to display the U.S. flag, and asked one simple question: why? The HOA president, a man named Robert Kent, leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "We must maintain visual harmony in our community. Large flags disrupt that." I stared at him, stunned. "Visual harmony?" I repeated. "You mean freedom looks messy to you?" He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just said, "We have standards for a reason, sir." I left that meeting more furious than ever. I wasn't the kind of person to pick fights, but this wasn't about me anymore. It was about everyone they'd pushed around and intimidated into silence. At night, I couldn't sleep. So around midnight, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started typing. I wrote a post for our town's Facebook group. I told the whole story: the letters, the fines, the visual harmony comment, and how my neighbors were afraid to fly their own flags. I attached pictures of my flag and a copy of the notice they'd sent me. I didn't expect much to happen. Maybe a few likes, a couple of sympathetic comments. But within an hour, the post started blowing up. People were furious. Some couldn't believe an HOA had the nerve to call the American flag disruptive. Veterans, local families, even folks from nearby towns started sharing it. By morning, my inbox was flooded with messages of support. A few people even sent me screenshots of their own letters from the HOA, saying they'd been too scared to speak out. One message stood out. It was from a woman who worked for a local news station. She asked if I'd be willing to go on record and share my story. I hesitated for a second. I wasn't looking for fame or attention. I just wanted to be treated fairly. But then I thought about Bill and all the others who had quietly taken their flags down because they were afraid. So I said yes. Within a day, a reporter came by. She interviewed me in my front yard, right under the same flag the HOA wanted gone. We talked about the letters, the fines, and the idea of visual harmony. When the interview aired that evening, everything changed. My quiet neighborhood suddenly wasn't so quiet anymore. Cars slowed down in front of my house, honking in support. Neighbors I'd never spoken to came by to shake my hand. Some even started putting their flags back up. It was small at first, just a few here and there, but I could feel something building. The HOA wanted conformity. What they were about to get was a community united.
It didn't take long for the story to spread beyond our neighborhood. By the end of that week, the local media had picked it up. The headline read, "Homeowners told to take down American flags, community fights back." The reporter's video clip from my front yard started circulating online. I didn't expect it to reach thousands of people, but it did, and fast. By the next morning, I had voicemails from radio stations, veterans groups, and even one local city council member. It was like the story struck a nerve that had been waiting to be hit. People started showing up at my house, not to protest, but to thank me. An older man in a Korean war cap came by and said, "I fought for that flag. Don't let them tell you where it can't fly." A young couple down the street brought over coffee and told me they'd put their flag back up that morning. Then the real turning point came. One of the biggest local news stations, Channel 7, ran the story in their evening broadcast. They interviewed more residents, including a few who had taken their flags down out of fear. And just like that, the silence broke. The next morning, I stepped outside, half expecting another nasty notice from the HOA. Instead, I saw something that made my chest tighten with pride. Across the street, Bill's flagpole was standing tall again, the stars and stripes fluttering proudly in the wind. 2 houses down, another flag had gone up, then another. By noon, half the block had joined in. That evening, I walked to the end of the street just to take it all in. Flags, everywhere. Every house on our cul-de-sac had one. Some small, some massive, some lit up beautifully at night. It wasn't planned, it wasn't organized, it just happened. Word spread fast. More houses in nearby streets started flying their flags too. Within days, the entire neighborhood looked like a 4th of July parade. Red, white, and blue as far as you could see. Of course, the HOA didn't stay quiet for long. Their inbox was flooded with angry emails from homeowners and messages from people outside the community condemning their unpatriotic behavior. Their Facebook page, which used to get maybe a dozen likes on their gardening posts, now had thousands of comments. Most of them said the same thing. How dare you tell people they can't fly their flag? This isn't about harmony, it's about control. Even local politicians started weighing in, calling the HOA's actions un-American. The pressure was mounting fast. By the end of the week, the HOA board announced an emergency meeting. I went, along with about 50 other residents. The room was packed, standing room only. You could feel the tension in the air. Robert Kent, the HOA president, looked exhausted. The same man who'd smugly told me about visual harmony just days ago now avoided eye contact. When he finally stood up to speak, he looked like someone who knew the walls were closing in. He cleared his throat and said, "We've heard the concerns of the community. After reviewing our guidelines and considering recent feedback, the board has decided to revise the flag policy to allow displays in compliance with federal standards." Translation? They'd back down. The crowd broke into applause, something I'd never seen in that room before. Even some of the board members looked relieved. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't gloat. I just said, all we ever wanted was to show pride in our country. No rule book should ever take that away. The local reporter who'd broken the story was there too, capturing it all. The footage of that meeting went viral. Within days, national outlets picked it up. Suddenly, our small-town HOA fight had turned into a headline about freedom, pride, and standing up for what's right. As the backlash grew, Robert Kent quietly resigned. The HOA scrubbed their social media pages and issued a public apology, saying they deeply regretted how the situation had been handled. But by then, it didn't matter. The neighborhood had already changed. That weekend, families came out to barbecue together for the first time in months. Kids were riding bikes, flags were flying, and the street felt united. I remember sitting on my porch that evening, watching the sun dip behind the roofs, the flags glowing in the fading light. For once, the neighborhood wasn't divided by rules and threats. It was brought together by something simple and true. The HOA wanted visual harmony. Well, they got it. Just not the kind they expected. The following Monday felt different. The sun rose over the neighborhood, golden light catching on dozens of flags waving proudly in the breeze. The same houses that once looked uniform and lifeless now shimmered with color, movement, and pride. It was a sight that no community guideline could ever design. It was real, human, and free. Word had gotten out that Robert Kent, the HOA president, had officially stepped down. The board released a short, carefully worded statement that read, "We regret the misunderstanding regarding flag displays and apologize to our residents for any distress caused." Misunderstanding. That word made me laugh a little. There was no misunderstanding. They'd been caught, and they knew it. Still, I couldn't deny it. The fight was over.
And for once, the right side had won. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the flags ripple across the block. Kids were playing, neighbors were talking, and for the first time in a long time, there wasn't that tension in the air, that feeling of someone always watching, waiting to hand out a violation notice. One by one, people stopped by to talk. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others admitted they'd been too scared to speak up before. Mrs. Carson from down the street told me, "I took my flag down last year when they warned me. I never thought I'd see the day we could all put them back up again." Her voice cracked a little. I told her, "You're not alone, ma'am. None of us are." Later, as the sun dipped low and the streetlights flickered on, I walked to the edge of the cul-de-sac. Every home, every single one had a flag flying. Some were brand new. Others were old and faded, showing years of weather and history. The breeze carried the faint sound of laughter and conversation. It felt like the community had woken up again, like we'd remembered what it meant to be neighbors, not just residents living under the same set of rules. A local veteran stopped by again, shaking my hand. He said, "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for all of us." I smiled and looked at the rows of flags lining the street. I said quietly, "All I wanted was to fly my flag." Turns out, the whole town wanted to too. And that's the truth of it. The HOA thought they were enforcing order, but what they really did was remind us what unity looks like. Now, every time I see that flag wave outside my home, I don't just think about freedom. I think about standing up, even when it's uncomfortable. I think about how one person speaking up can ripple through an entire town. And as the stars and stripes move gently in the evening wind, I can't help but smile. Because no matter how many rules they write, they'll never silence what that flag stands for.
They tried to take down one flag, but ended up raising an entire community. What would you have done if your HOA told you to take down your flag? And do you think HOAs should have the power to ban the American flag?
If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.
Think your HOA holds all the power? Think again. What I'm about to show you are 5 shocking legal loopholes buried deep inside HOA rules. Loopholes that can erase fines, expose their mistakes, and make them back off fast. Stay tuned, because once you know these, your HOA will never look at you the same way again. Ever felt like your HOA is just waiting to slap you with another ridiculous fine? Wrong shade of beige on your fence? A flower pot 2 inches too tall? Yeah, that's how they get you. But here's what they don't want you to know. Those rules they hide behind? Full of loopholes. Legal ones. And if you know how to use them, you can turn their own system against them. Today, I'm exposing 5 shocking HOA loopholes that real homeowners have used to erase fines, stop harassment, and even make the HOA back off completely. Stick around, because number 5, that one's the nuclear option. HOAs were created to protect property values, but too often they act like mini dictatorships, handing out tickets for brass height and threatening liens over a rusty mailbox. Most homeowners don't realize that HOAs are corporations, not governments. And that means they're legally bound by specific rules, corporate bylaws, fair housing laws, and state regulations. If you read the fine print and know your rights, you can actually outsmart them legally. No screaming matches, no lawsuits, just smart strategy. All right, now that you're ready to fight back the smart way, let's jump into loophole number 1, where you use their own bylaws to stop fines before they even start. Loophole number 1, the proof or it didn't happen rule. Here's the first shocking truth your HOA hopes you never find out. They can't legally fine you without evidence. Sounds obvious, right? But you'd be shocked how many HOAs send out automatic fines based on a random complaint, a blurry photo, or sometimes nothing at all. Let's say you get that dreaded envelope, violation notice. You open it and see unapproved paint color on garage door, $150 fine. Most homeowners panic. They either rush to repaint or worse, pay the fine just to avoid trouble. That's exactly what your HOA counts on: intimidation and silence. But here's what they don't expect: you standing your ground legally. The moment you receive that letter, don't argue and don't apologize. Instead, calmly send this response, and yes, do it in writing. Please provide dated photographic evidence of the alleged violation, the name of the board member or inspector who confirmed it, and a citation of the exact HOA bylaw that was violated. That one paragraph changes everything. Because by law, and according to most HOA governing documents, they can't enforce a fine unless they have 1. Verifiable proof of the violation, 2. Gave proper written notice according to procedure, 3. Allowed you a chance to appeal before the fine was finalized. Miss any of those steps? Boom, their entire case collapses. Here's the real kicker. In actual cases from states like Florida and Texas, homeowners have had hundreds or even thousands of dollars in fines completely erased, not because they hired fancy lawyers, but because the HOA couldn't back up its claims with valid proof. Remember, HOAs act tough because they expect you not to question them. But when you calmly demand evidence in writing, you expose the weak link in their system. So next time a fine letter hits your mailbox, don't panic, don't argue. Just say, "Show me the proof." That's loophole number 1, and it's the first step to turning their own rulebook into your greatest weapon. Loophole number 2, the bylaw trap they don't want you to read. All right, now that you've demanded proof and thrown them off balance, let's talk about their biggest weakness, their own rulebook. Every HOA operates under a set of documents called Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, the CCRARs. Sounds boring, right? That's what they want you to think. Because buried inside those pages are loopholes that can completely kill a fine before it ever sticks. See, most HOAs assume homeowners never actually read these rules, so they'll fine you for things they think are against policy even when the CCRARs don't clearly support it. For example, they might claim your pickup truck violates the No Commercial Vehicles rule, but if that rule doesn't define what a commercial vehicle actually is, it's vague and legally unenforceable. Or maybe they fine you for installing a new mailbox without approval. But if the rulebook doesn't specify the approval timeline, they're required to respond within a reasonable period. If they don't, you win by default. Here's how you use this loophole. Go through the exact section of the bylaw they quote in your violation notice. Read it carefully, word for word. If it's vague, outdated, or doesn't clearly apply to your situation, you can write back, "According to section, insert number, of the HOA CCARARs, this rule does not specifically prohibit my action. Please cite the exact clause supporting your claim." That one line sends chills through every board member's inbox because it proves you've done your homework. Most HOA board members aren't lawyers. They rely on intimidation, not precision. When you hit them with their own language, you instantly flip the power dynamic. And just like that, loophole number 2 lets you turn their bylaws into your legal armor. Loophole number 3, the meeting minute miracle. If you've ever wondered how HOAs get away with sudden rule changes or mystery fines, this one's for you. Most homeowners don't realize this. HOAs are legally required to keep public records of all meetings, votes, and rule changes. They're called meeting minutes. And here's the loophole. If the rule they fined you for wasn't officially voted on or recorded in those minutes, that fine isn't valid. It's just paper intimidation. Let's say they fine you for leaving your trash cans out for too long. You check the rulebook. Nothing specific. So you politely email the HOA and request the meeting minutes from the date that policy was approved. If they can't produce it, boom, you've just exposed a procedural violation. That fine can be voided because the HOA didn't properly document the rule's adoption. And here's where it gets even juicier. If they refuse to give you the minutes, that's a violation too. Under most state HOA acts, yes, even in strict states like Florida, California, and Texas, homeowners have the right to access association records within a reasonable time frame. So if they stall or can't find them, your next move is simple. Please provide the official meeting minutes approving this rule, as required by state statute and HOA governance policy. Once that's in writing, you've cornered them. because HOAs love to bluff, but documentation doesn't lie. This loophole has helped countless homeowners overturn fines and even force rule reversals, all because the HOA skipped one simple administrative step. So before you ever pay a dime, remember, no proof in the minutes means no power in the fine. That's loophole number 3, the one that turns HOA red tape into your get-out-of-fine-free card. Loophole number 4, the selective enforcement trap. This one is a game changer, and most HOAs pray you never find out about it. It's called selective enforcement, and it's one of the strongest legal arguments homeowners can use to crush unfair fines. Here's how it works. Your HOA is legally required to enforce its rules consistently across the entire community. That means if they find you for, say, having your car parked on the street overnight, they must also find everyone else who breaks that same rule. But here's the twist. They almost never do. Let's say your neighbor has 2 cars parked on the street every night, but only you got the violation notice. That's selective enforcement. And in court, it's a serious due process problem. In fact, judges have thrown out HOA fines and even attorney fees just because the board couldn't prove they enforced rules equally. So, how do you use this loophole? Simple. Gather proof of inconsistency. Take photos, note dates, and document other violations of the same rule by other residents. Then send the HOA a written letter. I believe this fine constitutes selective enforcement, as other residents have not been fined for the same condition. Please review and rescind this penalty. That one line can stop them cold, because selective enforcement isn't just unfair, it's illegal. And if they ignore your letter and keep pushing the fine, you can escalate it legally knowing the law is squarely on your side. Remember, HOAs survive on intimidation, but the law demands fairness. So if they're enforcing rules selectively, they've already lost. That's loophole number 4, the rule that turns their double standards into your strongest defense. Loophole number 5, the procedural timing loophole. This one catches even veteran HOA boards off guard, because it's not about the rule itself, it's about when and how they enforce it. It's called the procedural timing loophole, and it's one of the cleanest ways to wipe out a fine without even arguing the violation. Every HOA is bound by its own timeline for enforcement, specific deadlines for sending notices, scheduling hearings, and giving you time to respond. These steps aren't optional. They're required by law and by the HOA's own governing documents. But here's the kicker. HOAs constantly mess this up. They'll send a violation letter months after the incident, or they'll skip the warning notice step completely. Sometimes they even fine you before the appeal period has expired, a massive legal mistake. Courts view this as a due process violation, meaning the HOA acted outside its authority. If they miss a deadline or skip a procedure, the fine becomes void on technical grounds, no matter what you supposedly did wrong. Here's how you use it. Go through your HOA's CCRAR and fine policy. Highlight every section mentioning timelines, things like a written notice must be provided within 15 days of discovery. Homeowners must be granted at least 10 days to respond before penalties are imposed. Then, compare those to the actual dates on your notices. If the HOA violated its own timing rules even once, congratulations, you've got leverage to demand dismissal.
The HOA might act like they hold the power, but procedures are their Achilles heel. One missed deadline, one skipped notice, and their entire case collapses. That's loophole number 5, the quiet time bomb that can make even the toughest HOA fold instantly. Outro. Take back your power. So there you have it. 5 shocking loopholes your HOA never wanted you to find out about. From knowing their rules better than they do to catching their timing mistakes, you now hold the playbook that flips the power dynamic completely. Remember, the HOA only wins when you stay silent. But you're no longer silent. You're informed, strategic, and ready to fight smart. So next time they send that notice of violation, don't panic. Pause. Pull out what you learned today and make them play by their own rules for once. If this helped you, hit that like button so more homeowners can fight back too, and subscribe for more real HOA battles and legal hacks. Because knowledge isn't just power, it's protection.
It started with something as simple as a wooden fence. A fence meant to mark boundaries, keep things private, and give a family peace in their own backyard. But in this neighborhood, peace was the last thing the HOA wanted. Within days of putting it up, the homeowner found themselves buried under threats, fines, and endless demands to tear it down. What began as a harmless improvement quickly spiraled into the pettiest, most personal battle the HOA had ever waged. The real question is, who would win this fight? Before the conflict, Alex Johnson's life was almost painfully normal. He and his wife Emily had moved to Oak Ridge Estates 5 years earlier, looking for stability after bouncing between rentals. The neighborhood was picture perfect. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, kids riding bikes until the streetlights flickered on. It wasn't just a house they'd bought, it was a home. Alex worked in IT at a nearby firm, while Emily managed a small photography business from home. Their 8-year-old son Max filled the house with the kind of energy only a child could bring. Saturday mornings meant pancakes at the kitchen island. Summer evenings meant barbecues in the backyard with their golden retriever, Buddy, waiting hopefully for scraps. Like many families in Oak Ridge, they paid their dues to the HOA without much thought. The fees kept the pool open, the playground clean, and the holiday lights twinkling every December. At least that was the idea. But beneath the polished surface of Oak Ridge Estates lay a current of quiet tension. The HOA board, led by a woman named Margaret, had a reputation for being strict. She was the type who measured grass with a ruler and took pictures of trash cans left at the curb a minute too long. People grumbled about her in private, but no one really challenged her, not openly. For Alex and his family, life carried on mostly untouched by all that, until one spring morning when Emily mentioned wanting more privacy in the yard. It'd be nice, she said, if Max could play without the neighbor's windows staring down at us. That's when Alex got the idea for a fence. Nothing extravagant, just a 4-foot wooden fence, stained to match the house, well within the HOA's guidelines. At least that's what he thought. Little did he know, that fence was about to change everything. Alex stared at the HOA letter in disbelief. It was worded in that cold, bureaucratic tone that seemed designed to intimidate. Immediate removal, non-compliance, violation of community standards. He felt his pulse quicken as he held the paper tighter, the edges crumpling in his hands. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, laying the letter flat on the kitchen counter for Emily to read. Emily skimmed it, frowning. "But you followed the rules exactly. We both went over them twice." She was right. The bylaws were clear. Fences were allowed, provided they matched specific guidelines. Alex's fence was standard wood, just the right height, and had been placed exactly on the property line. There was no gray area, no loophole. And yet, here it was, a demand that he tear it down. Alex decided to call the HOA office directly, hoping this was some clerical error. But when the receptionist transferred him to Margaret herself, he knew the conversation was about to spiral. Margaret's voice carried that clipped, condescending tone she had mastered so well. "Mr. Johnson, your fence has been deemed out of alignment with the community's visual integrity. It disrupts the flow of property lines." Alex's jaw clenched. "Out of alignment? Margaret, it's exactly on the property line. I measured it myself, twice." "That may be your belief," she replied smoothly, "but the board has reviewed it and the decision stands. You have 14 days to remove it or fines will be issued." Click. She hung up. The first fine came 2 weeks later. A crisp envelope arrived in the mail, demanding $150 for continued non-compliance. Alex's frustration turned into anger. This wasn't about offense. This was about control. He tried reasoning with her at the next HOA meeting. The board members sat in a stiff row at a long folding table in the community center. Margaret sat in the middle, like a queen presiding over her court.
Alex stood, holding photos and measurements. Here's proof the fence meets the exact requirements listed in the HOA bylaws. Height, 4 feet. Approved material. Placement, right on the survey line. I don't see how this is a violation. The board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Margaret finally leaned forward, lips curling into something between a smile and a sneer. Mr. Johnson, this board reserves the right to interpret the guidelines in the best interest of community aesthetics. And in our judgment, your fence fails that standard. Her words landed like a hammer. Alex wanted to argue, to shout, but he could see in their eyes it was pointless. The board wasn't going to side with him, not while Margaret ran the show. More fines followed. $300, $500. The numbers stacked up like bricks being laid to box him in. The notices warned that if unpaid, the HOA could place a lien on his property. The thought of losing his home over a fence made Alex's stomach twist. Emily urged him not to give up. "We can fight this. You're right, and you know it. They're just trying to scare us." So Alex fought back. He filed a formal appeal, sending documents and photos. Weeks later, the appeal was denied with a single sentence: violation upheld. The harassment escalated. Margaret began driving past their house slowly, glaring at the fence. Other board members started leaving courtesy reminders on their door, citing random issues. The grass was half an inch too tall. Their trash can was visible from the street. Their holiday decorations lingered too long. Each notice felt like a deliberate attack, piling on to the growing weight of frustration. The Johnsons' neighbors began to notice. Some offered quiet words of sympathy. "We know she's targeting you. She's done it before." Others avoided them altogether, not wanting to get caught in Margaret's crosshairs. Max, only 10, picked up on the tension. He asked one evening, "Dad, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong?" Alex knelt down, hugging him tightly. "No, buddy, we didn't do anything wrong. Some people just don't like it when others stand up to them." But even Alex's confidence was being tested. Every new envelope in the mailbox made his heart race. The fines had now climbed past $2,000. The threat of legal action loomed closer with every week. He began documenting everything: photos, letters, dates, even videos of Margaret stopping in front of his house. If they were going to war, he was determined to be ready. Then came the breaking point. One morning, Alex woke up to find a bright orange notice taped to his front door. It wasn't a fine, it was a final warning. If the fence wasn't removed within 7 days, the HOA would take appropriate action, including but not limited to legal recourse and forced removal at the homeowner's expense. Emily read it, her hands trembling. Forced removal? They can't just come on to our property and tear it down, can they? Alex wasn't sure, and that uncertainty ate at him. That night, as he sat at his desk surrounded by a stack of HOA letters, he felt the crushing weight of helplessness. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was about his right to live in peace, to enjoy the home he worked hard to buy, and he wasn't going to let Margaret take that away. The next day, Alex filed a complaint with a property rights attorney. The lawyer reviewed the documents, shaking his head. "They're bluffing. The bylaws are on your side, but people like this, they thrive on intimidation. They think no one will push back. If you want to fight, we can fight." For the first time in weeks, Alex felt hope. Word spread quickly in the neighborhood that Alex had hired legal help. Some residents cheered him on quietly, others whispered behind closed doors. But Margaret? She doubled down. At the next board meeting, she announced that troublemakers who refused to follow community rules would face serious consequences. Her eyes flicked directly to Alex. The tension in the room was suffocating. Alex knew the battle lines were drawn. But just when he thought things couldn't get worse, they did. One morning, Alex Howard came home to find part of his fence vandalized.
Several slats had been kicked in, splintered wood scattered across the grass. Max stood on the porch, wide-eyed, clutching the family dog. "Dad, someone broke our fence!" Alex's blood boiled. He knew exactly who was behind this. Maybe not directly, but Margaret's campaign had clearly emboldened someone. This was no longer just petty fines or letters. This was intimidation made physical. He called the police, filed a report, and added it to his growing case file. But deep down, he knew the real showdown was coming. The HOA had pushed him to his limit, and Alex was done playing defense. The Johnsons prepared for the fight of their lives, one that would expose the cracks in Oak Ridge Estates and reveal just how far people would go to control their neighbors. And when the truth came out, Margaret would regret ever starting this war.
The morning of the HOA's final meeting felt like the calm before a storm. Alex woke early, pacing the kitchen with a mug of coffee he barely touched. The papers sat neatly on the counter. Photographs, survey maps, measurements, letters, police reports, even copies of the vandalism complaint. Every piece of evidence carefully stacked, waiting to be unleashed. Emily placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Today changes everything. The community center buzzed with tension that evening. Chairs filled quickly as residents filed in, whispering to each other. The air was charged with curiosity, even fear. Everyone knew this meeting wasn't routine. It was about Alex, Margaret, and the fence that had split Oak Ridge Estates into camps. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, stiff and expressionless. Margaret, as always, positioned in the center, chin lifted, radiating authority. Her eyes locked on Alex the moment he entered, her stare sharp as a blade. When the meeting opened, Margaret wasted no time. The first order of business is the continued violation by Mr. Johnson concerning his unauthorized fence. Her voice carried across the room, cold and certain. Despite multiple warnings, fines, and final notices, Mr. Johnson has refused compliance. The board will now vote to authorize legal action. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alex stood, holding his file. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. Before you vote, the community deserves to hear the full story. Margaret smirked, clearly eager to shut him down. Mr. Johnson, this isn't a courtroom. That's where you're wrong, Alex cut in, his voice sharp. Because this is exactly like a courtroom when you threaten to take someone's home. And unlike you, I came prepared. He walked to the front, dropping his stack of papers onto the table with a heavy thud. The sound silenced the room. Here are the HOA bylaws. Section 4, Paragraph 2. Fences are permitted if constructed with approved materials, 4 feet in height, and within property boundaries. My fence checks every box. Here are the photographs. Here are the measurements verified by a licensed surveyor. Here's the approval slip from the contractor. He laid each piece down like evidence in a trial, his voice gaining momentum. Residents leaned forward, captivated. And here, Alex continued, holding up another page, are the fines you issued despite my compliance. And here's the police report. After part of my fence was vandalized. That didn't happen until after your campaign of harassment began. You didn't just target my property, you put my family in danger. The room erupted in whispers, eyes darting between Alex and Margaret. Margaret's face flushed, but she forced a laugh. Mr. Johnson, this is dramatic but irrelevant. The board has the right to interpret the rules for the good of the community. No, Alex shot back. The board has the right to enforce the rules as they are written. And when you go beyond that, when you twist them to suit your own bias, you're not protecting the community, you're abusing your power. Gasps filled the room. Even some board members shifted uncomfortably. Margaret tried to regain control. Order, order please, but her voice cracked under the weight of the moment. Alex wasn't finished. He pulled out one last sheet, the trump card. This is a letter from my attorney. It states that if you pursue legal action against me, we will file a countersuit for harassment, unlawful fines, and defamation. And based on the evidence I've collected, You will lose. The silence that followed was electric. Margaret's confident mask slipped for the first time, her jaw tightening, her eyes narrowing. A resident in the back stood up. He's right. The fence is fine. We all know it. Why are we wasting everyone's time and money? Another voice chimed in. This has gone too far. He's not the problem. The board is. One by one, neighbors began speaking, their voices rising in support of Alex. The tide was turning in real time. The once intimidating presence of the board suddenly looked small, cornered, exposed. Margaret pounded the gavel, desperate to regain control. Enough. This meeting will not devolve into chaos. But chaos had already arrived, and this time it wasn't on her side. Alex leaned forward, his final words calm but devastating. This ends tonight. Either you admit you were wrong and drop every fine, or we take this fight to court, where your power means nothing. The board sat frozen, eyes darting nervously between Margaret and the restless crowd. Margaret's hands trembled as she adjusted her papers, realizing she had lost. The vote never happened. The meeting ended in shouts and murmurs, residents surrounding Alex, shaking his hand, thanking him. Margaret stormed out, her once iron grip over Oak Ridge Estates shattered. For the first time in months, Alex felt the crushing weight lift. The fight wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about standing up, about refusing to be bullied, and he had won the turning point.
In the days after the meeting, Oak Ridge Estates felt different. Neighbors who had once avoided Alex now waved at him, stopping to talk when they saw him outside. Some admitted they'd been too afraid to speak up before. Others confessed they'd been fined or harassed in the past, but never fought back. Alex had done what most hadn't dared, to challenge Margaret openly and win. The board, under pressure, quietly rescinded the fines. The official letter of apology never came, but the silence spoke volumes. Margaret, however, wasn't ready to let go of her control so easily. She tried to spin the narrative, telling anyone who would listen that Alex had disrespected the community and created division. But her words fell flat. The damage was done. Her power had cracked, and everyone could see it. A few months later, an election was held for new board members. For years, Margaret had run unopposed, her name a fixture on every ballot. But this time was different. Several residents stepped forward, inspired by Alex's stand. Campaign signs popped up around the neighborhood, fresh voices for Oak Ridge and time for change. On election night, the results came in. Margaret was voted out, along with two of her closest allies. The board was reshaped almost overnight, filled with people who actually cared about fairness, not control. When Alex heard the news, he felt a strange mix of relief and vindication. He hadn't just saved his fence, he'd changed the course of the entire neighborhood. Life at home slowly returned to normal. The fence stood strong, a quiet reminder of the battle they'd fought. Max played in the yard without worry, Emily gardened without glancing over her shoulder, and Alex finally enjoyed his coffee without the dread of another envelope in the mailbox. But the impact reached further than their yard. The story of the fence fight spread beyond Oak Ridge Estates. Nearby communities heard about it, sparking conversations about HOA abuse and the importance of knowing your rights. For Alex, the biggest lesson wasn't about fences or fines. It was about resilience, about refusing to let fear dictate your choices, and about the power of one person standing firm even when the odds feel impossible. The video of that HOA meeting, secretly recorded by a resident, even circulated online, racking up thousands of views. In it, you could see Margaret's composure shatter, Alex's steady defiance, and the exact moment the crowd turned. Strangers from across the country commented, cheering him on, sharing their own HOA horror stories. It turned out the Johnsons weren't alone at all. Their fight tapped into something bigger, the universal frustration of being pushed around by petty authority figures who misuse power.
And while Alex never wanted to be a symbol of anything, he realized he had become one. Not just for his family, but for everyone who believed in standing up when something was wrong. In the end, the fence dispute became the most petty HOA fight Oak Ridge had ever seen, but also the most important, because it reminded people that sometimes the smallest battles reveal the biggest truths. Alex often reflected on it while walking past the fence. The wood slats, weathered slightly by time, weren't just a boundary anymore. They were a monument to perseverance, to courage, to never backing down when it mattered most. And maybe that was the real victory, not the board's retreat, not Margaret's fall from power, not even the fence itself, but the knowledge that his family could live freely, without intimidation, in the home they loved. "Funny," Alex once said to Emily with a quiet smile, "all this over a fence." Emily laughed softly, slipping her hand into his. "Not just a fence, our fence." If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.
They said moving into this neighborhood would be a dream. Quiet streets, friendly faces, and a fresh start. But the dream shattered the moment the HOA decided my pickup truck was too much of an eyesore. At first, I thought it was just a warning, maybe even a mistake. But then came the fines, the threats, and the humiliating notes left on my door. What started as a simple parking dispute quickly turned into a full-blown war with people who thought they controlled everything. And what happened next left the entire neighborhood stunned. So the question is, how far would you go when someone tries to take away your freedom just because they can? When Alex and his family first moved into the neighborhood, they thought they'd finally found the perfect place to settle down. The streets were lined with tall oak trees that gave shade in the summer. Kids rode their bikes in cul-de-sacs without a care in the world, and every front yard seemed perfectly trimmed, as if pulled straight from a postcard. For a while, life felt almost too good to be true. Alex, a hard-working guy who'd spent years saving for his home, was proud of what he'd built. His weekends were often spent tinkering with his pickup truck in the driveway, a vehicle that wasn't just a mode of transportation, but a symbol of his independence and grit. To him, it wasn't about appearances. It was about practicality and pride. The neighbors waved politely, and for the most part, everyone seemed welcoming. But beneath the smiles and neatly kept lawns, there was something Alex didn't notice right away, a quiet current of control that flowed through the community. A set of rules drafted and enforced by people who believed they had the right to decide how everyone should live. At first, it was subtle. A neighbor mentioning almost casually how strict the HOA could be. A letter slipped into the mailbox reminding residents of community standards. Nothing alarming, nothing worth worrying about, until those words turned into warnings. And those warnings would soon put Alex's truck, his property, and even his sense of freedom at the center of a storm he never asked for.
At first, Alex thought nothing of the letter taped to his door. It looked like another one of those standard HOA reminders. Keep your trash bins hidden, trim your hedges, the usual nitpicky things that neighbors grumbled about but ignored. But when he opened it, his stomach dropped. The letter wasn't about hedges or grass height. It was about his truck, the same truck he drove to work every morning, the one he used to haul groceries, help neighbors move furniture, and take his kids camping on weekends. According to the HOA, his truck was a violation of community standards because it didn't fit the aesthetic image they wanted to maintain. At first, Alex laughed. How could a truck, clean, well-maintained, and parked neatly in his own driveway, be a problem? He assumed it was a mistake, a clerical error, something that could be cleared up with a simple phone call. But when he reached out to the HOA board, the tone he got wasn't apologetic. It was icy. They told him flatly trucks weren't allowed to be permanently visible in the neighborhood. Either he hid it in the garage, parked it elsewhere, or faced daily fines. Alex tried to reason with him. His garage was too small to fit the truck, and parking it outside the neighborhood wasn't realistic. But the board didn't care. They cited bylaws, section numbers, and community image standards like they were gospel. Just like that, Alex realized this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding. It was going to be a battle. The fines started small, $25 here, $50 there, but they added up quickly. Within 2 weeks, the HOA claimed he owed nearly $500. Each notice came with a harsher tone, each one threatening legal action if he didn't comply. That's when the harassment began. Neighbors who once waved politely now whispered as he drove by. Anonymous complaints were filed against him, alleging noise violations, unauthorized modifications to his property, even accusations of leaving trash cans out too long. Alex knew none of it was true, but the HOA treated every complaint as fact. The breaking point came one Saturday morning. Alex was in his driveway, polishing the truck's hood, when an HOA board member, Janet, a woman in her late 50s with sharp features and a reputation for running the community like her personal kingdom, marched up the sidewalk. She didn't smile. She didn't greet him. She pointed directly at the truck and said, "This has to go. Today." Her tone wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. And when Alex calmly told her he wasn't breaking any laws, Janet leaned in and whispered words that made his blood run cold. "If you think you can win against us, you're wrong. We always win." From that moment on, everything escalated. Letters turned into certified warnings. Fines turned into threats of liens against his home. And suddenly, Alex's fight over a truck became something bigger. It became a fight for his property, his rights, and his family's peace of mind. But Alex wasn't the type to back down. He started documenting everything, every letter, every fine, every ridiculous accusation. He even bought a small camera to catch HOA members snooping near his property late at night. And sure enough, within days, he caught one, an HOA officer taking photos of his driveway from the shadows. When he confronted the board with the footage, they brushed it off, saying they had every right to ensure compliance. But Alex knew it wasn't about rules anymore. It was about power. They wanted to make an example out of him, to scare every other homeowner into silence. That's when he discovered he wasn't alone. One evening, while taking his kids for a walk, a neighbor quietly approached him. She explained that years earlier, her husband had faced the same treatment. Different issue, same tactics. They fined him into submission, drained his savings, and nearly forced him to sell. She lowered her voice and said, "They want people to fear them. That's how they keep control." Hearing that lit a fire in Alex. If the HOA had bullied others before, maybe he was the one who could finally stand up to them. But how? The answer came in the form of a single letter, the most aggressive one yet. This time, the HOA threatened legal action. They weren't just going after his wallet, they were going after his home. According to them, if he didn't pay up and comply, they could place a lien on his property. It was a chilling moment. The truck wasn't just a truck anymore. It was a weapon the HOA was using to try to strip him of everything he'd worked for. But Alex wasn't going down without a fight. He sought legal advice. The attorney he spoke with explained something shocking. While HOAs had power, their rules weren't absolute. Many of their so-called bylaws could be challenged, especially if they were vague, discriminatory, or enforced inconsistently. And the truck rule? It was all of the above. That revelation gave Alex hope, but it also raised the stakes, because now he had to make a choice. Quietly pay the fines and hope the HOA moved on, or fight them head on, risking everything in the process. For days, Alex wrestled with the decision. His wife worried about the stress, about the mounting threats, about what would happen if they lost. His kids asked why people were being so mean about Dad's truck, and Alex himself felt the weight of every possible outcome. Finally, he made up his mind. He wasn't just fighting for his truck. He was fighting for his home, his family, and every neighbor too scared to speak up. He was going to take the HOA to court. But as Alex prepared his case, gathering documents, photographs, and testimony, the HOA wasn't slowing down. They doubled down on their campaign, sending out newsletters painting him as non-compliant and disruptive. Some neighbors began avoiding eye contact altogether, scared of being associated with him. Others quietly nodded in support when no one else was watching. And then, just when Alex thought things couldn't get worse, he came home one evening to find a bright orange notice nailed to his front door. In bold letters, it read, "Final warning, failure to remove vehicle will result in legal action. It was the loudest, most public humiliation yet, a scarlet letter for the entire neighborhood to see. His kids asked if they were going to lose their home. His wife broke down in tears at the kitchen table. And Alex, he stood there staring at the notice, his jaw tight, his fists clenched, knowing one thing for certain. The fight was only beginning.
The day of the HOA hearing arrived like a storm. Alex had barely slept. The entire week had been building toward this moment, a closed-door board meeting where they claimed his fate as a homeowner would be decided. He knew they wanted one thing: total compliance. They wanted him broken, apologetic, willing to pay whatever fine they demanded. But Alex wasn't walking in alone anymore. His attorney, a sharp but calm man named Harris, walked beside him. Harris carried a thick folder of documents, photographs, bylaws, legal codes, and evidence of selective enforcement. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Alex felt a surge of confidence. This wasn't just about a truck. It was about proving the HOA had gone too far. Inside the meeting room, the board sat in a semicircle, faces cold and unreadable. Janet, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, sat at the center like a judge presiding over a trial. She adjusted her glasses and said in a clipped tone, "Mr. Johnson, you are here today because of repeated violations of community standards. Your refusal to comply has left this board with no choice but to consider escalated measures." Her voice dripped with smug authority. She thought she had already won. Alex clenched his fists under the table, but Harris leaned forward, calm and steady. "Before we go any further, I'd like to state for the record that Mr. Johnson disputes the validity of these so-called violations. Furthermore, this board has failed to apply its own bylaws consistently, and we have evidence to prove it." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Janet's smile faltered for the first time. Harris slid a photo across the table. It showed another neighbor's large van, parked openly in their driveway, untouched by fines or warnings. Another photo, an SUV with commercial decals, in plain sight, yet never sighted. And another, a boat, parked for weeks without consequence. Alex's heart pounded as the images stacked up. Harris's voice cut through the silence. "This is selective enforcement. You've singled out Mr. Johnson while ignoring numerous similar vehicles. That is not only unfair, it is illegal." Janet's jaw tightened. She tried to brush it off, insisting those cases were different or temporary. But Harris wasn't finished. He pulled out another document, this one a copy of the HOA's own bylaws. According to Section 12, subsection C, the rules regarding vehicle storage apply only to commercial vehicles with visible signage or oversized dimensions that obstruct community safety or access. Mr. Johnson's truck meets neither criteria. It is not oversized, and it bears no signage. By your own bylaws, this is not a violation. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Janet's composure was cracking, but she still tried to maintain control. "This is about the character of our community. We can't allow certain appearances to degrade property values." And that's when Harris delivered the blow that changed everything. "Let the record show that the board has admitted its decision is based on appearances, not on the actual written bylaws. That's called arbitrary enforcement, and that opens this HOA to liability. If you continue down this path, we will take this case to court, and when we do, we won't just be asking for relief. We'll be seeking damages, legal fees, and a full investigation into this board's practices." The room went silent, dead silent. Alex could feel the shift in power, like the ground itself had tilted. For weeks, he had been the one under fire, mocked, fined, threatened, harassed. But now, in this moment, the board was on defense. Janet's face flushed red, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, she sputtered, "You think you've won? This neighborhood doesn't want your truck. We don't want you undermining the standards we've worked so hard to build. You're a troublemaker, Mr. Johnson, and you don't belong here." The words hung in the air, dripping with venom. But in that instant, Janet had made her biggest mistake. She had revealed the truth. The HOA's war against Alex wasn't about rules. It was personal, arbitrary, biased. And every board member knew it. One of the quieter members, a man who had barely spoken during the hearing, cleared his throat. "I move that we dismiss all violations against Mr. Johnson immediately." Another member hesitated, then nodded. "Seconded!" Janet whipped her head around, furious. "You can't—" But she could feel the tide turning against her. The vote passed, 3-2, right in front of her. Just like that, Alex's fines were gone, his record cleared, his truck was no longer a violation. Alex exhaled, his whole body trembling with adrenaline. For the first time in months, the weight pressing on his chest began to lift. He had won. He had actually beaten the HOA. But as he gathered his papers and stood to leave, Janet leaned across the table, her voice low and venomous. "This isn't over, Mr. Johnson. You may think you've won, but you have no idea what we're capable of." Her eyes burned with rage, her voice shook with spite. And in that chilling moment, Alex realized something. Yes, he had won the battle, but the war might not be over. He left the meeting with his head held high, his truck safe, and his rights intact. But as the boardroom door closed behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that Janet's words weren't just empty threats. Because sometimes, victory comes with a price. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to accept defeat.
The very next morning, word began to spread. Homeowners who had quietly endured their own HOA headaches, threatening letters over garden gnomes, fines for leaving trash cans out too long, warnings for children's bikes left near the sidewalk, suddenly saw Alex's case as a beacon. He wasn't just one man standing up to the board. He had cracked the veneer of their authority. Neighbors who once avoided Alex, fearing guilt by association, started stopping by his driveway. Some came to thank him. Others came to share their own stories. One elderly couple revealed they'd been fined hundreds of dollars for planting roses that weren't on the approved color list. Another family had been threatened with legal action for a backyard treehouse. All of them had kept silent, too afraid to fight back. Now, they weren't afraid anymore. And slowly, the narrative in the neighborhood began to shift. Janet, once seen as the unshakable enforcer of community standards, now looked vulnerable, overreaching, exposed. For the first time, her power cracked, not because Alex yelled louder, but because he had used the HOA's own rules against them. But Janet wasn't about to go quietly. She doubled down. If she couldn't break Alex with fines, she would try another way. She launched whisper campaigns, accusing him of being trouble for the community. Anonymous notes appeared in his mailbox, calling him selfish, saying he didn't respect the neighborhood's image. Small acts of sabotage began, his trash cans mysteriously knocked over, HOA notices left in his yard like calling cards. And through it all, Alex stood firm. He didn't fight back with the same pettiness. He documented every note, every incident, every small injustice. Because he had learned the most important lesson of this battle. When you shine a light on corruption, you never stop documenting. Meanwhile, Harris, his attorney, followed up with the board. He sent letters reminding them of their vote, warning them of the consequences of retaliation, and urging them to review their enforcement policies. He knew what Alex now knew. Janet was not just a neighbor with too much free time. She was a liability waiting to explode. The tension simmered for weeks. Then came the breaking point.
At the next annual HOA meeting, open to all residents, dozens of homeowners showed up, more than ever before. Many had never attended a meeting, assuming their voice didn't matter. But this time, things were different. Alex's case had awakened something. People wanted answers. The board sat at the front, faces tight with nerves. Janet tried to keep control, rattling off the agenda like nothing had changed. But the residents weren't there to listen. They were there to confront. One by one, homeowners stood up and shared their experiences. Stories of unfair fines, harassment, intimidation. The room grew heavier with each testimony. The board members squirmed. Janet tried to silence them, but the tide had already turned. Then a neighbor stood and said what everyone was thinking. "We didn't elect this board to bully us. We elected you to serve us. And if you can't do that, then maybe it's time for a new board." The room erupted in applause. For the first time, Janet's mask of control completely shattered. Within weeks, a recall petition circulated. Signatures piled up, and at the next vote, the community made its choice clear. Janet was out. The fallout for her was brutal. Years of ruling with fear and pettiness evaporated in a single moment of public rejection. She disappeared from community life, retreating into her home, rarely seen except for the occasional bitter glare as Alex drove past in his pickup truck. But for Alex, though, life slowly returned to normal. He parked his truck in the driveway each night without fear. He enjoyed barbecues with neighbors who once kept their distance. He saw kids riding bikes again, gardens blooming with colors outside the approved list, and families daring to live freely on their own property. But more than that, Alex felt something deeper. He realized his fight wasn't just about one truck or one rule or even Janet herself. It was about standing up to injustice, no matter how small it looks on paper. Because small abuses of power, left unchecked, grow into bigger ones. And sometimes it only takes one person refusing to be bowed to make an entire community rise. Months later, Alex reflected on it all. The sleepless nights, the endless stress, the moments he thought of giving in just to make it stop. And he realized if he had given up, Janet would still be ruling unchecked. His neighbors would still be living in fear of petty letters and arbitrary fines. Instead, his battle had sparked change. And as he looked at his truck, muddy from a weekend camping trip, sitting proudly in the driveway, he couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol. A reminder that no matter how powerful or petty an HOA thinks it is, it only holds as much power as the people allow it to. The story of Alex versus Janet became neighborhood lore. New residents heard it within weeks of moving in. A cautionary tale about what happens when authority goes too far, and what happens when someone dares to fight back. Some laughed at the absurdity. Others shook their heads in disbelief. But everyone remembered the lesson. Because in the end, it wasn't just about a truck. It was about freedom. It was about dignity. And it was about one simple truth that echoes far beyond one neighborhood, one HOA, or one conflict. The moment you stand up to bullies, no matter their title, no matter their position, you strip away their greatest weapon, fear. And that's the real victory.
If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.
What if I told you my neighbor had a secret room hidden inside their house? A room the HOA swore didn't exist. At first, it sounded like one of those neighborhood rumors. But one night, I heard noises coming from inside. Metallic clanging, the low hum of machines, and shadows moving across the window when no one was supposed to be home. I thought it was nothing until I found out the HOA had actually sealed part of the records, almost as if they were hiding something. That's when I realized this wasn't just a room, it was a secret, and the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. What I discovered behind that locked door left me speechless.
I live in a suburban neighborhood called Oak Ridge Estates. From the outside, it looks picture perfect. Manicured lawns, kids riding bikes, neighbors waving from their driveways. But behind every white picket fence, there are stories, whispers, and secrets. One house, in particular, always caught my eye. It wasn't run down, it wasn't flashy, just ordinary. Too ordinary. But neighbors talked. They said inside that house was a room, a hidden room, that nobody had ever been allowed to see. At first, I laughed it off. I mean, who hides a room in their own house? But the more I heard, the more I noticed little details myself. Deliveries at odd hours, curtains always drawn tight, a window that seemed to belong to nothing. And then came the moment that changed everything. I overheard Margaret, the head of the HOA, warning another resident not to ask questions about the room. That's when I knew there was more to this story than anyone wanted to admit.
The problem was simple. How do you investigate something that no one will talk about? The HOA was like a brick wall. Every time someone mentioned the room, the board members got defensive. It's just a basement. It's nothing important. Focus on your own house. But I couldn't let it go. I started digging through HOA meeting notes, vague references to restricted areas and community compliance storage, but nothing concrete. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones. One said they'd heard loud thuds at night. Another claimed they'd seen men in uniforms hauling boxes through the side entrance. A third swore that years ago, someone else tried to investigate and suddenly moved away without explanation. The challenge wasn't just uncovering the room, it was breaking through a wall of silence. The more questions I asked, the colder the stares became. I wasn't just facing curiosity anymore, I was facing resistance. And resistance meant there was something worth hiding.
I decided to investigate, step by step. First, I walked past the house at different times of day. In the mornings, nothing unusual, but late at night, that's when things got strange. A faint glow from the cracks in the blinds, the unmistakable hum of machines, like industrial fans or power tools. I took notes, times, sounds, even shadows. I could make out movement that didn't match someone simply living their life. Next, I tried documents, HOA bylaws, property records, building permits. That's when I found something odd. Years ago, a construction permit had been filed for the house, but the project was marked as confidential. A sealed room, reinforced walls, and something listed as environmental containment. Containment? For what? Then came the deliveries. I saw vans with no logos dropping off identical brown crates. The delivery men never lingered. They wheeled the boxes straight inside through a side entrance that no one else ever used. I asked a delivery driver once, half jokingly, "What's in the box?" He froze, then muttered, "Property of HOA." I laughed, but he didn't. He just shut the door and drove off. I wasn't alone in my suspicions. A few neighbors admitted they'd seen odd things too. Flickering lights, loud bangs, even one who claimed to hear voices chanting late at night. Sarah, my wife, thought I was going too far. She said, "It's probably just storage. You're making this bigger than it is." But my gut told me otherwise. The final clue came from a contractor I tracked down who had worked on renovations years back. When I asked him about the house, he shook his head and went pale. "I can't talk about it. Just don't go inside." That's when I knew. This wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was a mystery, one that was hiding right in plain sight.
The breakthrough came on a gray afternoon, the kind of day where the whole neighborhood felt hushed. Clouds pressed low, shadows stretched long, and the hum of cicadas made the silence more noticeable. I was walking past when I noticed something unusual. The side door to Margaret's house wasn't just open, it was propped with a crate. 2 delivery workers wheeled in another heavy box, sweat glistening on their foreheads. My pulse quickened. This was my window. I waited until they disappeared inside. Then, careful not to be seen, I slipped closer. Every step felt like thunder in my ears. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over record. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I wasn't in a normal house. The air was heavy, metallic, and unnervingly cold, not like a basement draft, but more like walking into a server room. The walls weren't painted plaster, they were steel, lined with insulation and bolts. This wasn't home construction, it was industrial. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into the dimly lit room, each tagged with stamped labels, HOA Confidential. My hand trembled as I pulled one drawer open. Inside were folders, each marked with the names of people I knew, neighbors, families. I pulled one out, Miller, Daniel. My stomach dropped. The file wasn't just a few pages, it was thick. Inside were photographs of my house, my car, even me mowing the lawn. Notes about my so-called infractions, copies of fines I'd never even received. I flipped to the next folder, my neighbor's name. Same thing, photos, complaints, legal drafts. This wasn't an accident, this was a system. And then I saw the crates stacked in the corner. Unlike the cabinets, these weren't labeled with names. They were labeled with dates. Curious, I pried one open. Inside were pre-written violation notices, all signed, all stamped, ready to be delivered in the future. I froze. They weren't just documenting the past, they were planning the future, punishing residents before they'd even done anything. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing against the steel walls. I turned. Margaret stood there, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing like a predator that had caught its prey. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. For a second, my legs wouldn't move. My brain screamed, "Run," but my body felt frozen in place. Then instinct took over. I bolted, past the cabinets, past the crates, shoving the door open so hard it banged against the wall. I didn't stop running until I was back in my house, door locked, chest heaving. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like someone coming for me. But one thing was certain. I couldn't stay silent.
The fallout began almost immediately. At the next HOA meeting, the community center was packed. Dozens of neighbors filled the chairs, some standing along the walls. Everyone had heard the whispers, and everyone wanted answers. Margaret sat at the front, gavel in hand, her smug expression daring anyone to challenge her. The agenda was written in bold: authorization of legal action against Daniel Miller. I stood when my name was called, folder of evidence in my hand. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart hammered. "Before you vote," I said, "you all need to see this." One by one, I laid out the evidence. Photos I'd taken inside the hidden room, copies of the files showing residents' names, the pre-written fines stamped with dates that hadn't even happened yet. The room buzzed with whispers, heads turned, faces went pale. Margaret slammed the gavel. "These are fabricated lies. He broke into private property." But I cut her off. "They're not lies. They're your system. You've been tracking us, fining us, planning punishments before anyone even violated a rule." I pulled out my trump card, a written statement from an attorney. It confirmed that parking spots, fines, and secret surveillance all fell outside legal HOA authority. If it continued, The HOA board could be sued personally. For the first time, Margaret's face faltered. And then the spark that lit the fire. From the back of the room, a neighbor stood. "He's telling the truth! I've seen that room too!" Gasps rippled. Another neighbor stood, then another. Soon, voices erupted across the room. People who'd been bullied, fined unfairly, or silenced. Margaret banged the gavel again, but no one listened. Her power had cracked. The board members, usually silent under her glare, shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered to each other. Others avoided her eyes entirely. Finally, one spoke. "Maybe it's time we reviewed leadership." That was the moment it all unraveled. In the weeks that followed, Oak Ridge Estates felt transformed. The fines against me were rescinded, the hidden files were collected and destroyed, and neighbors who once avoided eye contact now came to my door to thank me. "You stood up for all of us," one man said, his voice shaking. At the next election, Margaret ran again, but this time she wasn't unopposed. 3 new candidates, backed by the community, stepped forward. When the ballots were counted, Margaret's name sank to the bottom. She was out. The HOA board was reshaped almost overnight. Meetings became open, transparent. Rules were enforced fairly, not as weapons. And for the first time in months, peace returned. I could park in my spot without fear. My wife Sarah smiled again when she watered her flowers. Even the neighbors, once divided, now chatted openly. But the story didn't end there. Someone had recorded the explosive meeting and leaked it online. Within days, the video racked up thousands of views. Strangers from across the country flooded the comments. That HOA Karen got destroyed. This is why I'll never live in an HOA community. Daniel is a legend. My fight had gone viral. What started as a neighborhood dispute had become a story people everywhere could relate to. It wasn't just about a secret room anymore. It was about abuse of power and what happens when ordinary people refuse to back down.
Sometimes I walk past Margaret's old house. The side door is locked now, the steel room emptied. But I'll never forget stepping inside. The chill of the air, the rows of cabinets filled with secrets, the sight of my own name on a file I was never meant to see. It taught me something bigger than HOA politics. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Truth has a way of clawing its way into the light. And sometimes, the most ordinary-looking house can hide the darkest stories. One evening, as Sarah and I parked in our driveway, she nudged me with a smile. All this over a secret room. I laughed, shaking my head. Not just a room, our right to know what was hidden inside. That was the real victory.
So what about you? Have you ever discovered something in your neighborhood you weren't supposed to see? A secret room? A hidden document? Maybe even an HOA cover-up? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because the next story might just make you look at your neighbors a little differently.
They told me not to ask questions. They told me not to poke around in places that didn't concern me. But what if the very thing they were hiding was sitting in plain sight all along? In the middle of our neighborhood stood a house, boarded up, forgotten, and officially erased from every HOA record. But when I pushed back against their warnings and stepped inside, I discovered why they wanted it hidden. What I found would send shivers down my spine. And once it came to light, it would change the entire community forever. Did you dare to open the door to a house your HOA swore never existed? At first, life in the neighborhood seemed perfect. The kind of place where lawns were trimmed like green carpets, mailboxes gleamed with a fresh coat of paint, and neighbors waved politely but rarely lingered long enough for real conversation. It was orderly, predictable, and tightly controlled. For the family who had moved in only a year earlier, this was supposed to be their escape.
They wanted quiet weekends, safety for their kids, and the kind of stability that came from living in a well-managed community. The HOA promised all of that, and on the surface, they delivered. But something always felt off. On walks with their dog, the family noticed one house that didn't match the perfection surrounding it. The grass grew tall, vines snaked up the siding, and the windows were sealed tight with weathered boards. No one came and went. Children whispered about it on their way to school, daring each other to run up and touch the peeling front door before sprinting away. When they asked about it at the next HOA meeting, the room went quiet. The president cleared his throat, brushed the question aside, and moved on to the next agenda item. No explanation, no discussion, just silence. It was strange, yes, but in a neighborhood where rules dictated even the color of your blinds, the silence felt heavier, more intentional. And deep down, the family knew this house was the thread that, if pulled, would unravel everything the HOA had worked so hard to control.
The more they asked, the colder the responses became. Letters arrived in the mailbox, fines for yard infractions that didn't exist, warnings about unauthorized modifications they had never made. Each fine came with the same message: pay quietly or face escalation. But the timing was too perfect to ignore. Every new question about the abandoned house brought another punishment. Neighbors began avoiding them. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when they approached. Even friends who once invited them to backyard barbecues now crossed the street to avoid being seen together. Fear had seeped into the air like smoke. The family decided to dig deeper. They searched public records, but the property seemed to vanish into a bureaucratic black hole. No current owner listed, no sale history, nothing but decades-old deeds that went nowhere. It was as if the house didn't exist officially. Still, the HOA's obsession with silence made their curiosity burn harder. Why go to such lengths to hide one house? One night, returning from work, the father noticed a figure near the property. A man in a dark jacket was slipping through the gate, flashlight in hand. But when confronted, he bolted, vanishing into the night before a word could be exchanged. The next morning, another fine appeared in the mailbox. This one claimed their trash can had been visible outside approved collection hours. The absurdity was clear, but so was the threat. The HOA was weaponizing anyone and anything to silence them. The family stood at a crossroads. Back down or push forward? They chose the latter. Late one evening, under cover of darkness, they cut through the padlock on the side gate of the abandoned house. The boards creaked, dust filled the air, and the smell of rot clung to the walls. Flashlights revealed peeling wallpaper, overturned furniture, and stacks of unopened HOA leathers, dozens of them, years worth, stuffed into a corner like someone had abandoned their life overnight. And in that moment, it became clear. The HOA had been hiding something far bigger than a neglected house. But before they could process it all, a shadow appeared in the doorway. Someone had followed them inside.
The HOA president himself stood there, red-faced, fury in his eyes. He demanded they leave immediately, warning that they were trespassing, breaking community law, endangering themselves. But his outrage was too desperate, too rehearsed. When the family refused, when they told them they'd seen enough to involve the city, something inside him snapped. His threats turned into screaming. He called them liars, troublemakers, people who didn't belong. He swore he'd have their homes seized, their reputation destroyed, their lives ruined. But what he didn't know was that the family had recorded everything. The fines, the threats, the inspections, and now this confrontation. The video went viral within days. News outlets picked it up, calling it the HOA horror story. Reporters swarmed the neighborhood.
Residents who'd once stayed silent found their courage, stepping forward with their own stories, harassment, intimidation, and years of unexplained HOA spending. The final blow came in court. A judge ordered a full audit of the HOA, uncovering years of mismanagement, secret funds, and illegal practices. The abandoned house, once dismissed as irrelevant, became the centerpiece of the case, a physical symbol of their corruption and secrecy. In the courtroom, when the ruling was read aloud, the president's face fell. He was barred from ever serving again. The HOA board was dissolved. Heavy fines were levied. And for the first time in years, the residents felt free. The climax wasn't just legal, it was emotional. The family who endured so much stood vindicated. Their defiance had turned the tide. The monster had been unmasked, its secrets dragged into the light for all to see.
The silence that followed the HOA president's downfall was unlike anything the neighborhood had ever experienced. For years, fear and secrecy had been the background noise of daily life. Residents whispered about fines, avoided eye contact with board members, and carefully trimmed hedges or painted shutters in obsessive compliance. But after the hearing, when the judge ruled against the HOA, the community changed almost overnight. The abandoned house at the center of it all, once hidden, boarded up, and treated like a shameful secret, was finally opened. The locks were cut, the windows unsealed, and for the first time in decades, sunlight poured into its dusty halls. What neighbors saw shocked them. Mold creeping up wallpaper, piles of rotting furniture, and stacks of HOA correspondence left unanswered, some still in envelopes dated years back. It was as if time had been frozen, the house standing as a monument to neglect and obsession. The family, who had endured months of intimidation, fines, and veiled threats, stood there among the crowd as city inspectors shook their heads in disbelief. The house wasn't just a health hazard, it was physical evidence of everything the HOA had tried so desperately to hide. And here was the irony. The very rules the HOA used to terrorize residents had left the board themselves vulnerable. By keeping the property hidden, refusing to disclose ownership, and silencing anyone who asked questions, the leadership had violated transparency laws and concealed community records. When that came to light, the ruling was swift. But the true impact wasn't just in legal victories. It was in the shift of power. For the first time, neighbors who once avoided each other now gathered in the street, talking openly, no longer afraid. They formed a committee, not of control, but of accountability. The family, once painted as troublemakers, found themselves approached with gratitude. Children rode bikes freely again, yards blossomed with individuality instead of rigid uniformity. And the abandoned house was eventually restored, not by the HOA, but by a collective of residents who wanted to turn a symbol of secrecy into one of rebirth. The scars remained, yes, but the lesson was clear. Power, when unchecked, festers, and silence only feeds it. The final town hall meeting brought everything full circle. Residents gathered in the newly restored house, its walls freshly painted, the air smelling of wood polish instead of mildew. The family spoke not of revenge, but of truth. This house was hidden from us for years, but maybe that's the real lesson. Secrets, when left in the dark, grow into monsters. What destroyed this community wasn't just neglect, it was silence. Never again should we let fear stop us from asking questions, from standing up when something feels wrong. The applause was thunderous. And from that moment, the abandoned house wasn't just bricks and wood anymore,
It was a story, a warning, a reminder that communities must be built on trust, not fear. And maybe, as you watch this now, you should ask yourself, if there was an abandoned house on your street, one your HOA swore didn't exist, would you have the courage to open the door?
They came in the dead of morning, armed with bulldozers and legal notices, ready to take my home apart. My neighbors watched in silence, some smirking, others shaking their heads as the HOA claimed I violated every rule they could invent. I had paid every fee, followed every regulation, yet here they were, acting like kings of a kingdom I didn't even know I lived in. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I discovered something about my family that made the HOA's power play look like child's play. What happens when the people trying to destroy you don't know who they're really messing with?
Everyday life in our little lakeside community had always felt peaceful. Quiet streets lined with perfectly trimmed lawns, families waving as they walked their dogs, the occasional kids' laughter echoing from nearby yards. My mornings began with coffee on the porch, the sun glinting off the water, my family joking and planning the day ahead. We weren't flashy, we weren't confrontational, we simply loved our home and the freedom it gave us. But beneath the manicured lawns and polite smiles, the HOA watched every detail. Rules hung over the neighborhood like a shadow. What color you could paint your mailbox, how tall your garden flowers could grow, even how late you could park your car. Most residents ignored them quietly, paying fees and moving along. We never thought much about it until one small notice arrived in our mailbox, the language sharp and threatening, hinting at a violation we didn't understand. At first we laughed it off, thinking it must be a clerical